I have 6:30, and so I'll call the meeting to order. So we'll try to get started with the drainage study. And is somebody from Garver here to make a presentation? Is that the plan?
I just texted Ken. I think he may have thought it was 7 o'clock.
Okay.
So 6 o'clock or 6:30.
Okay, so we can come back to that then?
Yes,
Okay.
That's what I would suggest.
Okay, all right, we'll come back to that. So the next item we have on here is to talk about solar panels at City Hall. And I know that, were you going to take the lead on that one?
Yes, Mayor. So at our last workshop, we talked about adding solar panels, and council asked staff to look into the numbers that were provided, and then what that might, the debt service and as well as an RFP. So in your packet is some additional information that Mr. Henry put together. And it looks like if we did a 20-year note, but we paid off the actual bond in 15, well, I'm sorry, we do a 15-year note, and the payoff for 20 years, we'd save about 5,000, and et cetera. So you can see kind of, he puts some different percentages.
Yeah, the key there, Ty, right, being the percentage that increase of cost goes up, right? So, what we don't know the future, how much power finance is going to increase. So here's three separate options, right? So is it going to go up about 1%, 7% year? Is it going to go 3% year? Is it going to go 4% year? And so therefore, depending on how fast the increase of price goes, depends on how quickly it gets paid off. And so that's kind of some of the uncertainty of trying to determine how quickly it's going to pay off. So sorry if I jumped over you a little bit there, but
so really we just wanted to give you that information, show you that we had the RFP together, and if you're comfortable with the numbers, then we can get that sent out and start working on that project. So,
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith.
just so I make sure I understand that 5,300, 5,600, and 9,000 at those different percentages, that's an annual savings or total savings?
Total savings after the 20 years.
After the 20 years.
So yeah, after that, on the 21st year, we're looking at saving $12,000, $12,600. It's just more of, I think what the council directed me to look at is one, what's operation and maintenance going to cost? And I got a hold of the guys at Bartlett Solar, and they said they can put you on a plan that they'll come out once a year and evaluate the system. It's around $200 for that one trip. And then I also, stuff breaks sometimes. He says not usual, but to have a tech come and serve, it'd be about another $100 an hour. So I factored in there $300 a year. We're going to have to operation maintenance this system. I got a hold of ICI Insurance, and they ran what insurance going to cost. It's around $500. So that the bond payment plus those two costs gives us the total cost. Like Joel or Representative or Council Member Schroeder said, the biggest variable is what pretty much what how much do you think energy costs are going to increase over the next 20 years? Because those solar panels are going to produce roughly the same amount of energy no matter what. There's too many variables to really figure out whether or not they're out. So what I did is got a hold of Westar and said, over the last 10 years, how much has rates increased? And it's kind of hard because they had 1 year where they had a merger and rates went down 17%. So again, a lot of variables. But he gave me a 1.72%. So I taking that, I said, okay, say it goes up 2% a year. Like you said, it could be 3, it could be 4. So that's why I gave you 3 different scenarios. And the break even on those scenarios were the 20, after 20 years, we'll break even. Then it becomes all profit after 18 if it's increased at 3% a year. And then after 17 if it increased at 4% a year.
And after 20, they're warranted through 25. So we're suspecting in the worst case scenario, we make money for those years. And then after 25, they won't break at year 26, but maybe at some point they'll start breaking and efficiency will go down, so on and so forth. But they should, provide us some finances many, many years after that, is how I think I had presented that originally. And I think that's correct as well.
I believe those panels lose efficiency after the day you put them up. And I'm looking at this, and this is a long time before we break even. And for a net gain of $5,000, I think we ought to quit right now and wait till prices get better or something.
Net gain of $5,000.
That's
How do you
his bottom
figure?
line here.
No, that's after 20 years. That's the payoff period. The net gain with the
No, the payoff
based on-
period was 15 years,
No.
and you still had 5 years that you didn't have to make payments.
Ted, do you want to explain it, or
Is
you want
that
me to
not
keep
correct?
arguing with him? I don't think that's right.
That's what it looks like to me, that we make a bond payment for 15 years, then it takes us another 5 years till we get to where we're 5,000 to the good, because we lost so much money the first 15 years.
So if you look at the difference column, yeah, I mean, I took it as we're losing money for the first 15 years and then rapidly gaining it back. So I would say John's assessment's right on the table. Now, how long do you think this life's going to be? Is your guys'?
So if they're warranted for
It's a fair
25,
question, but we're
and
not-
just making this go out to 25 instead of 20 makes that 5,000 number like
but
pretty
after-
meaningless,
After
right?
20 years, we won't have 100% efficiency either.
Yeah,
I don't know what
possible.
we'll have at 20 years, 80% or something. So we may not even break even at 20 years.
So line
So
one,
that's why I'm saying for the $5,000 difference, I think we should just stop right here for now. And if the panels get cheaper or more efficient or something, we revisit this in the future.
Mr. Smith?
thank you. So I just want to make sure I'm looking at this table correctly. The first line of the first table up there in year one, I see the bond payment is $12,890. Operations and maintenance is $300. And so that basically assumes that they find something when they come out here for the annual inspection, whatever they're going to do, they can do in an hour, which is maybe a good average. I don't know. That'd be something that we could ask other people that have done this, maybe if we want to move forward. The insurance additional cost, because we have this extra asset that we now have to insure, is the $489, which is that total cost of $13,679 for the first year. And then the savings at 1.7% column, that is our projected electric bill cost of $9,161 that we won't be paying. That's a reduction in basically our payment to Evergy.
Exactly. And that number was taken from Bartlett's Solar, that original number of how many devices they're going to outfit our city hall with. So I didn't make up that number. The escalator is the 1.7. So each year I increase it 1.7 because it pretty much produces that wattage on that first year to, so we wouldn't have to pay $9,000 because our total bill is like $16,000 a year. So
Okay.
we're pretty much just
Because
getting a deal.
Because this isn't going to offset our full electric bill.
No.
We expect it to be reduced by $9,000. And so that means in the first year, we're actually going to be spending $4,500 more on electricity, with a bet that in year 16 at the 1.7 number that we will spend less on electric.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
So, Mr. Mayor, I have
Mr. Ellisall?
thoughts on this as well. In our initial presentation we saw a couple weeks ago, it was a 16-year payoff, I think was the estimate. Is that right?
Yeah, 16 was correct. So then when we added the insurance cost and the annual thing, it does go up. That's correct. So you guys had asked about that. So this is the update for that. Yep.
Right. Okay. So I was hoping to see us get better than that. I mean, I am leaning on Councilman Welch's side on this. I don't think there's enough juice for the squeeze on this. Just based on my research and my understanding, I mean, if it was closer to 10 years, I'd be much more open to considering it. But I just, looking at that final savings over 20 years, I don't think that's enough money to justify the complication to this whole system and maintenance. And I just don't think the number justifies the effort to do it here.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Smith?
I was just gonna say, what I was thinking about as you said that is there's a certain like headache factor that'll come along with this, that there's some sort of embedded costs in the fact that we now have a more complicated system and another thing to coordinate for a maintenance guy coming out every year. And so I do connect with that. That does make sense to me. When I was originally thinking about this, what I was really hoping to see is that our total annual cost was basically less than the savings, or less than or equal to, so that we could basically pay for this with what we would have spent on our electric bill
And we-
eventually get the solar panels for free.
With a 20-year bond, unfortunately, we pretty much would have. The 15-year bond, it doesn't quite match. So possibly in the future, if we consider taking out a 20-year bond on something else, because it's probably not worth taking a 20-year bond out on this small of an amount, but maybe we could consider revisiting that in the future. Because then because you're saying the payments and the costs are equal, so there's like nothing out of pocket.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's a astute observation, because that's what I was hoping as well. They would not cost us anything out of pocket.
As structured, I think I concur with Councilman Relsop and that this may just not be worth it for right now. But I do like the idea, and I think we should continue to monitor it carefully. And if we do a 20-year bond, we should talk about this again.
Yeah, I think I concur on that. I think we should consider that as well. And I'm not continuing arguing for this, but just something to think about in the future with prices. So the winds of the world, as far as conservatives and whatnot in Washington, are talking about stronger and stronger about a carbon tax, and we still have 60% of our more like 60% is coal, or 50% is coal, and like 25% is natural gas here. And if there's ever a compromise in Washington on a carbon tax, in Kansas, that is going to be a pretty big increase on our operating costs. This is a guess. I have no idea what's going to happen. I'm guessing this could not happen, right? We might easily go up 2% of the year, and I can't predict that. But one thing I do like about this, and I'm excited we're going to possibly rethink it in the future, is this sort of gives us stability, right? Like 60 or 70% of our charge, we know how much it's going to cost. It's guaranteed it's only going to be about this 2% a year. And no matter what regulations or whatnot would come down for different changes, we don't have to worry, we don't have to worry about most of the volatility of that. And so it's I think a good thing for us as well. It sort of keeps us at a good price. But I once again, I'm not saying that as a necessarily lockdown. We should do this right now, because I can't predict the future, but it is something to consider, to be able to sort of count on stability on what we're going to pay here for prices. And so anyway, I thought that comment was worth making.
Okay, so when we initially looked at this, I think I said then the numbers weren't wowing me, and when we had to add additional cost, they still don't wow me. So if we wanted to do this just because we wanted to be a better stewards or something like that, it'd be okay. But these numbers don't make economic sense. There may be a time that will happen, but I think the consensus here is let's table this for now, and we'll move on to the next item. So
I do appreciate the numbers you put
Yeah,
together, Ted.
thank
This
you.
has been really helpful in making the decision, I think.
okay.
Yeah, I appreciate this too, Ted, especially the finding out what the actual increases have been over the last 10 years.
Yeah.
So that we had something
This is
more
good.
solid to deal with.
Good work on this, and we do appreciate that. Thank you. I see Mr. Tim Lee has shown up, and from Garver, and so we'll go back up to the drainage study that we're going to start with.
Howdy. Apologize for my tardiness. Years of conditioning told me that 7 o'clock was when I needed to be here, so my apologies for being late. I've got a PowerPoint that should be coming up here in a minute. So just while we're waiting for that to go, I came here, it's been a few months now. I came and presented a study where we talked about the different things that we had identified and talked about it then. And Ann and I have been talking since then about trying to figure out a way to prioritize what we're doing, because the overall prices are just really expensive. I mean, I think the total bill was in excess of $600,000 to do everything in the list. And so trying to take that list and change it to something that's a little bit more affordable was kind of a goal that we've been talking about. And in the meantime, there's been a couple other things that popped up where we noticed this year that there's been some erosion on the side of the road along, I believe it's Batten Street, where the water coming out of the lake there is coming out through one of the culverts and it's cutting into the side of the road a little bit. So Ann asked us to look at that and evaluate what could be done to stabilize that. And then some erosion was identified at the south end of 45th Street that started up. So there's been a couple other things that popped up, but she asked me to kind of come out tonight and talk about if we were to break the project down into pieces, what the pieces would be, what kind of costs would they be, and talk about how to prioritize that. And there's a lot of different ways you can prioritize things when you've got a big list of items. How do you do that? How do you make that choice? Is it raw cost? Is it who's complaining the most? Is it what's the most dangerous? There's a lot of different ways. So going back to where we were before, there was 3 different projects we looked at: Aurora Park, Hillcrest, and Cozy Drive. The prices shown here are just the summary of the costs that were shown at that time, including there was a couple sub items originally. And so, like I said, it's pretty close to $600,000 total for everything that we had looked at the time. Those costs were in early 2021. Contractors have not been good on pricing this year. Supply shortages, labor shortages. We've seen projects be more expensive this year than we've seen in the past. So I think they've peaked. I think we're on the downhill side. I think they're going to get more affordable, but this year probably would have been a bad year to try and bid these projects with the prices that we've seen on doing our subdivision projects that we do. So, but those are the prices where we were before. So again, we didn't have there's not enough budget to take care of everything at once. And so we created a scoring matrix, and I worked with public works staff to help me score the projects, and we came up with 5 different scoring criteria that we used on it. 1 is public safety, 2 was citizen concern, 3 was current condition, 4 is impact on future maintenance, and then 5 is cost to implement. So those are the 5 items that we looked at when we were looking at this. So first, public safety. We scored everything on a scale of 1 to 5. We did equal weighting on this when we did our matrix. We didn't try and put extra weight on any particular item. If you wanted to put more weight, we could adjust the scoring, but we did 1 to 5. So you're going to see that throughout this list. And a score of 1 means that we don't interpret it as having any danger to the public. A score of 5 means that public safety could be compromised if the item's left unaddressed. And frankly, most of the items here aren't public safety items. It's, hey, the ditches are kind of growing up a little bit, we need to cut them down, or hey, this is going on. But most of them aren't public safety. They're more nuisance or more just they need addressing. It's more maintenance than safety. But we include it as a component because it can be an important factor. The next one is citizen concern, and we scored it based on conversations with city staff as far as the frequency and volume of complaints they've received about items. We also kind of when our survey crews were out there doing some of the survey work, when we were surveying ditches, we got a lot of feedback, and it went several different ways. There's some folks who want to see stuff done. There's some folks who'd rather have their properties left alone. So we factored that into the scoring. And when we ran into some of those projects where it was very clearly divided one way or the other, we gave it a 3 just to try and be fair to it. Because if you've got a lot of folks on each end of the spectrum, trying to balance that out. Then we looked at current condition, and you can see there's a couple culverts there that you can see that the one culvert on the left, it's kind of smashed in a little bit, and the one on the right, it's overgrown with the ditch is overgrown and it's not going to flow as well. We looked at how current condition was affecting the performance of it. And so flat ditches, we have some ditches that are very flat where we have drainage issues and maintenance issues, and those would be a 5. But like a culvert that might be kind of bent up and doesn't look great, but it runs well and it's still flowing properly, it might still be given a 3, even if it looks bad, but it's performing okay. So we kind of tried to balance that out a little bit. And then a lot of these, in general, everything on this list scored 3 or higher because we wouldn't be talking about it if it wasn't a problem. If there wasn't a condition issue, it wouldn't be on the list. So most of the items scored at least a 3. Future maintenance impact, 1 to 5 again. And so we scored that on the perception of if we fix this, is this going to make maintenance for the city staff easier? Is it going to improve homeowners when they're maintaining the yards? Is it going to help? What kind of impact is it going to have? I did kind of lower the score a notch on items that if we feel like you do the work, but it's inevitable that it's going to regress to its current condition, unless it's constantly maintained, we probably mark those down to one point just because of that. But in general, we try to look at what kind of impact is this going to have on future maintenance for the city and the public. Cost to implement was our final scoring, and we kind of put together a chart here on a scale of 1 to 5. And cost is an important factor in doing a project, but it's not the factor. And you can see that's not necessarily a linear scale on how you do that, because prices rise very quickly when you get to different levels of work, and you don't want to overly punish a project just because it's a little bit more expensive. So it's not a linear scale on the scoring, but we tried to pick a fair scoring that would kind of break it down into different areas. And I will say that in the later part, you're going to see some costs shown, and these are opinions of costs right now based on the information we have, and that it's subject to change as final plans are developed. You know, as you get into the work, you may realize there's utility relocations or there's some other issue that would change the cost. But so that's the cost to implement. And then so I'll start out now. I'm going to jump into the ranking. And so, like I said, we gave our spreadsheet to the public works staff to look through and break down. And on the left here is I broke out all the different items that we had in the report that needed to be looked at and considered. And it's a pretty thorough list. The one thing I took out of the list of this list right now, but it was on the radar before, is the Eagle Lake outflow. So that one isn't on the list. I had it in my list, but I inadvertently didn't include it with Public Works. So I took it off my list as well. But that is one that you'll need to keep in mind when you're doing your evaluation on how to spend money. So a lot of different categories. And so like public safety, we have a culvert where there's erosion at the end of the culvert at 45th and Hillcrest, where the road's starting to cut out because of water running down the road and running off the edge of the actual roadway is being eroded. That's an urgent matter. The city had received complaints about it. It is in poor condition, so it scored a 5 because it's in poor condition. And our suggested fix to it, we think it's going to be relatively easy to fix. And that one, actually, this is the Public Works. They scored it a 1. I would have scored that one higher on the cost to implement. But that's an example of one where public safety was there. There's grading issues east of Hillcrest. That project there, that's on 45th and on 45th Street east of Hillcrest. There used to be some kind of a cross street culvert pipe that was removed at one point in time. And it was removed. The ditch kind of just drains to the side now, and the road just overtops periodically. So it's a hazard for cars driving down that road in heavy rain events. That road floods and overtops pretty easily there. The ditch, there's a ditch inlet at 37th and Harding that they rated that pretty high. That floods. It gets clogged and it floods. It clogs pretty easily and it floods, and it can flood the street and cause overtopping of the street. 39th and Harding, they also had that scored pretty high on public safety. those pipes are undersized. They're not in great shape, and that road overtops periodically. And you can see from there the public safety parts, they drop pretty quickly once you get past those first few. You get a lot of 3s, 2s, and 1s below that. So the scoring for public works staff, they also provided some opinions as far as what they saw about those notes or what they felt needed to be done. So I'm going to jump to my slide then. So the next slide. So this is how we rated it as Garver. We went through and graded it, and I didn't have as many 5s. I didn't have as many that I perceived as being public safety issues. But that's the thing about whenever you do these kind of spreadsheets and surveys, sometimes the more data you get, the more it kind of evens out, and you kind of find where the natural mean is. And so we didn't have near as many 5s. We did have a couple that we had labeled where we had high citizen concerns. One that ended up middle of the pack for us, we've got a culvert that's over on Parkwood. It's right in somebody's yard, so when the water runs across, it pours up into the yard. And so that one, the city gets a lot of complaints about that one, so I scored that one a 5. Like I said, like the ditches in Aurora Park, I scored that a 3 just because there's a lot of different opinions about that. Our crews had people telling them, get off our property. We had people saying, when are you going to do it now? So there's certainly a lot of different opinions on the regrading. So we scored that a 3, but when you go back to what the staff put, the regrading of ditches for Aurora Park, where is it on there for them? It's here. They had 5 because lots of people complaining about it. So they scored that a 5. We chose a 3, but that's kind of the variation on that you can have. So we went through our scoring and ranked it, and we have our the total scores. And again, these are evenly weighted to not give extra weight to any particular item, but that could be changed pretty easily if somebody wanted. I'll go to this slide here now. And so this is where we actually totaled up. We took the Garver score and the public works score and then averaged them and then sorted by the average. And on all of these, what I did is I sorted by total score first and then cost second. So you can't see cost on these spreadsheets on these pages, but it was part of the spreadsheet. So that was my tiebreaker. Cheaper goes first. If everything else being equal, you do the cheaper one first. So that's how it's sorted, was in that fashion. But there's certainly other ways you could sort that. But the cool thing about once I averaged them is I ended up with almost no ties. It really reduced the number of ties down. So where I had a lot of ties before, there's only a handful of them now, and it kind of sorts itself out over time. And one of the things we could look at on this is whether or not it would be one of those things that we would want if the council had interest in running through the matrix and filling it out, or if we want to get other folks involved in that, we could certainly do that to provide some more feedback, or you could just take the list as it is. But again, the thing about lists like this is they're guides. They're not definitive. They just help assign a priority to give you some guidance on it, because when it really comes down to it, you may look at this and you can go, well, that item right there, the cross streets pipes at 39th and Harding, I get more phone calls about that than anything else. That may be a higher priority just because of what you're actually running into yourself. So this list should be looked at as a guide. Again, the one thing I'll say is the projected costs here. The thing I did is I took my earlier spreadsheet that I had done for the projects where it totaled $600,000. And I looked at, okay, if we did this ditch, how much would it be? And if you were to add up this column, it actually adds up to significantly more than $600,000, because every time you ask a contractor to mobilize, every time you do something separately, there's an additional cost to it. So that's the one thing about breaking it into pieces is it makes the most sense to do that, but at the same time, there is a cost for doing that. Spreading your cost over time is going to raise your cost to get all of the work done eventually. but if it makes it to where you can get it done, that's a thing to consider. So if you were to total this up, it does significantly exceed the original estimate. I'll at this point, what I guess I'll do is I'll just say that's kind of the quick run through as far as what we did with the matrix, how we scored it. Ask me some questions. We can go back into it. We can look at the spreadsheet if you have any questions about any particular item.
I have a question.
Mr. Smith?
Just curious, as you went through these, were we able to identify any that could be done with public works staff, or do we think these are all things that'll have to be contracted out?
No, and so breaking it into pieces, that is the one benefit, is a lot of these items do turn into items that public works staff can handle and have done some in the past to some degree. So, and if, for instance, on that is the replacing the cross street road pipe at the cul-de-sac and Cozy. It was replaced, not in the past 10 years, it was replaced by public works staff. Now, the downside is it was in poor condition, it was damaged, and it needed to be replaced. And it was replaced with the same size pipe. In our estimation, it looked like it probably could have been bumped up one size pipe or one pipe size. And so when it comes time to do that one in the future, I would recommend going up a pipe size on that one. But that's an example where those cross street pipes, so the city staff has the ability to do a lot of that. Where it starts getting into problems is like the regrading of the ditches. The city staff doing long longitudinal projects like that. They don't really have the equipment and the expertise maybe to do that as well, as far as really doing long stretches of regrading like that. But some of the smaller individual projects, certainly you could have the city staff replace items instead of having a heavy contractor do it.
Very good. Thank you for, I can't digest all of this because I don't know all this stuff, but I'm familiar with some of it. So, but this is good information, and we really appreciate the scoring and the estimates of the costs. It'll give us some guidance.
Yeah.
So we can decide how to go forward. Does anybody else have any questions for Mr. Lee?
I do.
Mr. Smith
Did you
or
break
Welch?
this down by area of town instead of the whole thing so that we know what it would cost to do Aurora Park versus Hillcrest versus?
I can easily do that. The way my spreadsheet is set up, as far as the actual spreadsheet is, and I actually even went deeper, but you have to be careful about how much information you put because you're trying to keep the screen where you can read it and keep it legible. And even this is flirting with being difficult to read. But I actually have a column here where each area is actually, I could sort this by area, by item, by Garver score. I actually had a 1 to 21 ranking for Garver ranking. I had a Bel Aire that's public works staff ranking. So yeah, it's pretty easy to sort it different ways. If you wanted to see one where it was broken out by area, it would be pretty easy to do that.
I'd like to know that because if we're talking about rebuilding streets somehow in Aurora Park, I'd like to know also if rebuilding the streets eliminates some of these projects so that we can get some of our money back by rebuilding versus doing the repairs.
Oh yeah.
Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Oh yeah, and absolutely. I'll just tell you just an easy answer on that is going back to the beginning here, that 422,000. Now it would probably be a little higher if I was re-estimating that today. I'd probably be a little bit higher. But if you were doing a complete rebuild, you wouldn't need to do that because that would be included in the cost.
We wouldn't need to do any of that?
Virtually everything that's included that would be. Now the thing is rebuilding the streets, and you could ask Ann, it's going to be a lot more than $422,000.
I know that,
a lot
but
more than that.
But if it's $1.5 million and we save 400,000, then we're really only. I don't want to spend 400,000 and then come back later and still spend $1.5 million. Is what I'm.
And that's a good point, and that's good thinking because you certainly wouldn't want to spend $250,000 regrading streets and then 3 years later come back and replace it with curb and gutter and storm sewer. That would be a poor use of the city's resources if you were to replace the street quickly like that. It would be a poor use of resources. But anyway, generally the 400,000, that is money that you wouldn't have to spend. Everything that was called out in this project would end up getting torn up and redone as part of a street replacement project.
Is that assuming that curb and gutter was part of that street replacement?
Well, even now, if you were just to do an asphalt mat, then if you were just to, or some kind of concrete mat, if you were just to come with a mat pavement, some of the work would need to be done. But at that point, if you weren't, it depends when you're saying rebuild the streets. So probably 3/4 of that cost would still be there if all you're doing is just an asphalt mat or a concrete mat.
Right. We talked about just doing asphalt with open ditches.
Yeah. Most of that cost, if all you're doing is just converting it to a mat pavement, then most of the items would actually still need to be there in that instance. So
I'm
I
not sure what
appreciate
the
the
prices
clarification
were
on
on
that.
doing that, but
yeah.
Do we know the cost? So if just using that 422,000, how does that compare to the cost of curb and gutter? Do we know that answer?
I did a back of the napkin. It's been a while. It abandoned me. Oh, you're buying
she snuck up.
I was thinking it was in the $1.5 million range, but does that sound like the right range?
For the quick numbers that I had put together for just an asphalt mat with new culverts under each driveway, replacing culverts, cross street culverts, that was about a $2 million project. Adding curb and gutter, I'm not sure if that's even feasible given the flatness of the area. Because if you add curb and gutter, then you need to add storm sewer. And I'm not sure if we could get piping from the downstream end all the way on to the upwards end. If that was even possible with elevation, you're probably adding on another $1 million to $1.5 million for all that pipe work.
If we did curb and gutter, could we build it so that we didn't have to have the piping underneath? Could we slope the road just enough that it would drain on down
The purpose of
road?
curb and gutter is to get there's two different types of streets. There's a urban section with curb and gutter, and then there's a rural section that's crowned in the middle with ditches on the side. The curb and gutter street are generally lower, so all the water runs onto the street, and then you have to get it off. If you don't put in inlets and pipes, then you're risking damaging the street and having to replace that at a quicker interval.
Is that just because of the water or because of freezing?
That's because of the water running down. And it doesn't really matter if it's concrete or asphalt. You still see the degradation. Concrete will last longer in a circumstance like that, which is why we used it up on hedgerow. But you're still going to see degradation at some point in the future, and it's going to degrade faster than if we could get the water off of the road.
Okay.
And
Would you
the other
suggest we use concrete ditches like we have out there, like Wichita has at Maze Road?
That would help, especially in certain locations along Harding Street by Dr. Burrow's property. That ditch is extremely flat. There's very little slope in that. And so that is one area that, in talking with Ken and Garver, there is suggested to be a ditch liner. And I believe that went most of the way down Harding as well, just because of the flatness of the slopes, and the soils are not the type to soak the water in. They're more of the type that just it sits until it eventually evaporates away.
Okay, so we could use that kind of ditch instead of a curb
Yes,
and then put asphalt between?
yes.
And is that still a $2 million plus project or just a wild guess here? I know you haven't put pencil to paper.
More than likely, yes, because those ditch liners do get very expensive.
Yeah, and I'll mention, she was talking about the storm sewer, and the one thing I'll mention, if you look up here at the screen, the lake here where it exits out, from there down to here, you'd have to fit storm sewer, and that's where she was talking about the grade concern. You can always get it done, but do you end up with real expensive, wide, shallow boxes under the road to get it to happen? Do we have enough grade to get to where we can generate some grade here? I know one of the concerns that I had here is the way this ditch in this area, it goes out, turns a 90, and comes down. It's not hydraulically efficient, and you're losing grade every foot you go. You're losing grade as far as trying to run around. But there's a certain amount of storm sewer you're going to be stuck no matter what, even if you try and minimize it because of the lake outlet and in the middle. You're going to have a pretty substantial storm sewer system right in the middle there.
There's a vast volume of the water coming through that area right there off that Fawn Lake and down Harding there.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And of course, it comes out of Eagle Lake and dumps down into this lake and continues on. I think there's another, it's probably 120 acres of upstream drainage outside of this project that comes down through Eagle Lake and dumps down into here. And so this area you're stuck with a lot. The other areas, I mean, the biggest issue here is going to be getting easements through properties for storm sewer. If you're trying to run storm sewer between lots, you're going to have to get drainage easements to carry it out. And just, finding routes that are not obstructed by landscaping or utilities or other things can be a challenge. But you'd still have to punch through with storm sewer in a few spots over there as well.
So it sounds like an open ditch was our best.
Well, from a feasibility standpoint, it's going to be your best option. I mean, Aurora Park is a beautiful neighborhood, nice big lots, lots of really nice homes. The downside is they're nice big lots, which means that they're expensive per lot. If you ask the homeowners to try and carry some of the brunt, it gets expensive very fast, just because these lots are probably 50% bigger or more than traditional city lots as far as their frontage goes.
So if you didn't think about how much anything costs and you just said, what's the right way to do it? What's the right way to do it if you don't care about how anything costs?
As far as, are you asking redoing the roads versus this project? Well, if I had my say, if money was no object, I'd want to get rid of the gravel roads. I hate gravel roads. That you can't. There's nothing to do about the dust. You're always going to have dust. You're always going to have maintenance. You got to grade them. It's extra work for city staff to keep the roads in good shape. So money not being an object, you want to have a hard surface road. And I think Ann would agree with that.
Would that include curb and gutter if money were no object, or what do you feel about that?
So a lot of that's personal preference. In general, I would recommend it starting from scratch. You always want to do curb and gutter just because it gives you a lot more control and it's less maintenance. Because the bad thing about having open ditches is you got to maintain the open ditches. Curb and gutter, there's very little maintenance. You know, you run the street sweeper through a few times a year. You maintain it once every 5 years, and you know the homeowners do the mowing up to the edge, and there's less maintenance. So if money was absolutely no object, you want to do curb and gutter if you can afford it. But and that's why the city, you know, when we're doing these subdivisions in general, we want to have curb and gutter streets, is because the city doesn't want to take on maintaining ditches in neighborhoods. They want to be able to just have the road take care of the drainage and be done with it. Do you agree with that?
So if we had an open ditch, then the concern is that it would silt in?
Well, in all honesty, the way the road looks right now, the way those ditches look right now, we can spend $400,000 and in 30 years they're going to look just like they do right now. It's inevitable. It is what it is. You can't stop it. You're going to have silt deposition. You're going to have thatch buildup. It's a recurring cycle when you have open ditches. It's inevitable.
If you do pave the street, you extend the life of those ditches though, because you don't have the material from the street washing into the ditches.
And that's a good point. You would reduce the gravel and the other materials, the fines being washed into the ditches.
But
So it would extend that process. That's for sure.
if you had a regular maintenance program of those ditches, you could avoid having to spend that 400,000 in 20 years or so.
You could delay it. I mean, you could certainly delay it. If you have a good maintenance program, you can delay it. I mean,
Right.
if you look at like Sedgwick County, they have programs where they go and they have equipment that's designed to just kind of, it'll cut the ditches in, but it's pretty raw. It tears up the ground, and nobody, you wouldn't want it in your front yard. That's the trouble with those programs is they work great for county ditches. They wouldn't work great in somebody's front yard. But like Ann said, paving the road would certainly reduce the amount of fines and stuff that get washed out of the gravel into the ditches. And it would improve in that situation, but it's inevitable that at some point down the road that they'll require additional maintenance again.
So just clarify a little bit with the curb and guttering. You don't have a clean slate right here. You have a lot of development in this area.
Yes.
So if you put curb and guttering, you could end up with some serious problems there because you don't have a right access to replat anything, right? You can't move much dirt around.
Really, honestly, I'd say the biggest challenge out there would be the storm sewer, as Ann suggested. I think she nailed it with that. Having the depth, can we get storm sewer put in there? Is there enough grade from the 37th Street here to grade back in and pull that grade down enough to get storm sewer to work? That's the biggest challenge. The properties, the right of way. This intersection is kind of an awkward deal, but in general, you could make curb and gutter work if you wanted to. I don't think we have any extreme grades out there where, like if you think about the Woodlawn project by the park, where the street on one side is 5 feet higher than the other. We don't have that kind of grade situations out here that I can think of off the top of my head. So if you could get it to work, yeah, I don't think it, if you could get the money to work, I think it's possible. I will say that kind of along with what Ann said, financially, I think it's a lot. A curb and gutter road's going to be quite expensive. But I haven't done a calculation, but it would not surprise me if it doesn't end up in the range she's talking about.
Yeah. Okay.
And so the ranges you're talking about, a paved road, 2 million, curb and gutter, 3.5. And I mean, how big of a guess is that? I mean, if you had a little bit of time, would you be able to hone that guess in a little bit more confidently, or is that as good as we're going to get?
No, I could definitely have, if I could get with, I mean, even the workshop next month, I could definitely have a little bit more of a rough, it'd still be a rough estimate, but it would be a little bit closer to where we wanted to be. Maybe instead of a 5,000-foot view, a 1,000-foot view. And that would also entail putting some extremely rough grades to storm sewer and seeing if you could even get it to work. I know with the grades that we have now on Harding Street, I'm very hesitant to even think that could work. Just the storm sewer would probably always have water in it. If you put it at a less than desirable grade or less than the minimum cleansing grade. And then you look at the maintenance. How does that get maintained if there's silt, or when people mow their yards and they put the clippings down the storm sewer, put grass or leaves down the storm sewer, that builds up over time. And unless you have a cleansing velocity and a certain slope on the lines, it eventually gets blocked. And at this point, we don't have the maintenance equipment to do that. So I'd want to make sure that the slopes would work before we even went down that road.
And to her point, I'll mention that Harding Street down in here at the south end, that ditch only has like 0.3% slope. We normally design storm sewer. If I'm just pulling a number out of the air for a storm sewer slope, it's 0.5% is what I like to use. So I use 0.3% all the time, but only typically on really large pipes where I have a fair amount of flow and shorter distances. But so she's right that we'd have to really look as far as those slopes go, because that ditch, the Harding one, as I recall, it gets down to 0.3% grade for hundreds of feet down at the very south end by 37th Street.
So you're saying you have half the grade that you would like to see there?
It's half the grade I would normally start with on my calculation. Yeah.
Right.
We do use flatter grades on larger pipes sometimes, but you have to be real careful about that. And she's talking about cleansing velocity, and yeah, typically 0.3%. On smaller pipes in particular, that can start being problematic. But
It sounds, I mean, for me personally, whether we end up deciding someday a very small amount of money to do or whatever, every piece of information matters when even the base cost is 400,000 on just on that one part. So I would personally like to kind of know as many details as we could, even if we don't act on any of those details.
yeah, and again, I mean, the one thing about breaking it into pieces is if you do find parts that you do find particularly onerous that you want to take care of in the short term, you're getting to the part where you can start budgeting for it and make it work. You may have some items you just have to decide, are you gonna pave the road? Do you wait until you make that determination? There may be some of that you want to do, but I would say that even if you were to go to the mat, if you're thinking about that kind of option, the one thing bad about doing some of the work you take all the time to get the road cleaned up and all that, but when you rework the road to put a hard surface on it, you have to tear up the road pretty significantly. You're going to end up with spoils getting dumped in ditches. You may end up doing work twice. I think if you were leaning that way, I think you'd want to, again, it kind of turns into the making sure you're timing it right if you're doing it. Does that make sense what I'm saying there? I wouldn't redo the ditches and then 6 months later decide to do a road project, because I think you'd end up duplicating work. Would you agree with that, Ann?
100%.
Back to the map we were looking at. What if we paved like the southwest roads, which would be about half of the roads? Would that gain us enough in reduction of dust and other things that we wouldn't have to do the other roads? Do you think we have to do everything?
If your main goal is the elimination, reduction of dust, you need to do everything. It's not just one
Okay.
road that's the concern as far as dust goes. They're all gravel. They're all going to have dust problems.
And I
Yeah,
think
but
you
I
run
think-
the risk of offending some of your citizens as far as
I'm
well, you
just
picked me and not
wondering,
them, why?
because I'm thinking those south roads get a lot more traffic than the dead ends,
Yeah.
is what I'm, and I didn't
that's
know
fair
if,
enough.
you know, if we had a lot less traffic there, the dust wasn't as big a problem or not. Somebody's got a comment over here.
It's pretty amazing how much traffic there can be on a dead end road.
Okay, okay.
They've seen me turning around a couple times in the last week or two up there, probably.
Me too.
I've gotten a funny look when I drove up to the dead end too, so.
And I will say I do feel sympathetic, because my car was pretty dusty when I got home after driving on the road. So I understand the frustration with the dust. I do understand. So, but yeah, I mean, as far as trying to pick a spot, I think it's difficult to really say this spot or that spot is better or worse. I know Ann and I have talked about the rock selection and what options there are, and as far as, and I know the city has been trying to look at different sources to find rock that's less dusty, and that's an ongoing process of trying to iterate and find that right source.
Okay, another question.
Okay.
The road that shoots off to the right, does it actually have driveways on it? Or is that something we could possibly make just a access path or something?
This one here, no, it does have there's a couple driveways onto it. They might be just accessory building driveways, but
There's houses on
but I know that
Okay,
People live there.
I'm just looking
Yeah,
for
this-
ways to cut down the miles to work on.
yeah, this
People
house
live
here
there.
does go onto it, and it seems like this house had a driveway onto it as well. Yeah, and if you look really close, I know there is an accessory building there that has a driveway too at the back of that lot. So there's a few driveways onto that one. Now, those there actually, interestingly enough, none of those have culverts on them, because the road kind of crests in the middle. So there's not a lot of drainage that goes to any driveway. So the water just sheets across those driveways. There's no culverts under those driveways right now.
So just to kind of help me organize my thoughts here, we asked you to present a drainage study, and you're kind of saying this would be the total cost, roughly, probably more than this if we did it today. Then you broke out the individual projects for us. This is what would be individual project. But of course, we're also bleeding into, we have other types of complaints that have nothing to do with the drainage study that you're presenting today, as far as dust or whatnot. Those aren't a part of the drainage study necessarily. And so then we're kind of trying to think through those as well to figure out how that all mushes together. I think this is the summary of, I think, what I'm trying to consider. And if anyone has any things I missed in that summary, please let me know. But at least that's how I'm thinking about it right now.
Yeah, and these projects like this, where there's a lot of moving parts and there's a lot of different small issues, it really is hard sometimes to decide where to focus it. And then you do have other issues like the dust arise and things like something that doesn't really affect the drainage. But I noticed when I was out there, when it was raining one time, the road tends to, as it's getting regraded and reworked, water stays on the road and you end up with this whitish yellow water running off into the ditches and spots, which Ann was alluding to as far as the ditches getting filled up with silt. So those things don't necessarily negatively impact the drainage, but they don't make it attractive.
No, I'm sure the road's washboard sometimes. It's a gravel road, right? I'm sure there's like a million different issues that people, yeah. Well, I almost wrecked many times driving too fast over washboardy roads as a teenager. So,
Okay, so the one critical statement I've taken out of all of this is we will not get rid of the dust as long as we have a dirt road or gravel road, whatever we want to call it.
I would be pretty confident that you would have difficulty getting rid of the dust as long as you have standard gravel roads. That's correct.
Okay. That's what I want to make clear, because I know all these people are worried about the dust, but they also don't want to pay for pavement. So they're going to have to pick one or the other.
And it's a challenge. I mean, I recommend anytime you have the opportunity to pave a road that you take advantage of that and get it paved, just because it does take care of so many of those issues. But again, I understand that, telling somebody, hey, it's only $225 a month.
Yeah, I can do a lot with $225 a month.
That's a lot of money. So, yeah. So, I mean, I understand it's not easy for folks to just all of a sudden find that kind of extra money laying around. So, I mean, I understand the concern with paying to pave it. So,
I got a question for Ted then. If we were to do roads and bond it out, what's the maximum length we could stretch this over to limit the monthly cost?
20 years. 20 years.
20 years is it? Okay.
So what I'm hearing is that we want to look at just some thumbnail, high-level cost of what it would be to do the paving. And we'd like to see this reorganized by project, by area, Aurora Park versus Hillcrest versus Cozy Drive.
yeah.
And just so we have that information, so we can say, okay, we know what, if it were Cozy Drive, we know that this would be what Cozy Drive would be.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
And to some degree, like I said, these costs here, if you were to do them lump sum, it would be somewhere in those ballparks. But I
Right.
can certainly take the spreadsheets at the back and give you more of a, hey, if you were wanting to focus on an area in pieces, here's what that total would be too. That's easy enough to do. So,
Okay.
And-
We appreciate that. And then we try to revisit this next month and see what information we have, new information we have. as
yeah.
well.
And there's a few of the projects on the list, I'll tell you, that we are actively working on. The one that was scored really high here, the repair ditch and road force slope at Harding. That is one. We are putting together a set of plans with the hopes that we can have city staff get that taken care of. We're planning on doing some permanent turf reinforcement mat of some kind to keep that from being a recurring problem. So there's some of these that probably will disappear off the list in time, just because they do need to be addressed in the short term, because they do have the potential to be a hazard if that road starts to carve out more where it starts to fail. But in general, though, most of this stuff it's a longer term concern.
Well, appreciate your protecting that interest in that area. So
Yeah,
I've
and
got another
I'll
question.
mention on the turf reinforcement mats, you talked about the concrete ditch lining and all that. The problem with any of that stuff, all that product, it's all very expensive per square yard compared to just grass and slopes. And that's where it gets troublesome. As a permanent turf reinforcement mat, $25 a square yard. Concrete, you can easily spend, when you're putting it down as a flume, it can easily cost $50 to $75 a square yard. It adds up real fast. And on long streets like this, it even just doing the ditch bottom does add up quickly.
We've got 3 neighborhoods, and I know Aurora Park's really upset about the dust. Have the other 2 neighborhoods made a significant number of complaints about dust?
I'd have to defer to Ann on that one. I have not personally heard that. I will say that, like I said, when we got visited by neighbors, it was in Aurora Park was where we got the most visits from our crew out
that's
there.
what the most neighbors are.
We rarely get complaints from any of the other neighborhoods. After this past grading, we did receive one complaint from Cozy Drive, but that was it. The predominant number of complaints are from Aurora Park.
So do we think there's a lot less traffic in those other neighborhoods? I could see Cozy Drive not having traffic at all, but
I don't think so. I think they understand that they live on gravel streets and that the gravel is the dust is to be expected. I don't really know why we're getting more in Aurora Park.
I do
Now, and
know
I'll say-
I do know Hillcrest takes a lot of traffic from the school, but
Yes.
tries to avoid Woodlawn. and they
Yes.
take Hillcrest instead.
And I will say there are 10 times as many homes in Aurora Park as there are Cozy Drive. So
Yeah.
you're going to have a different volume just by virtue of the volume of homes.
Right.
Any other questions on it?
So just to clarify for the next month, what I think Mayor probably already said. So I'm all interested. So he gave Kenley. We asked him to do, talk about drainage, and really appreciate that. And then staff, you're going to gather some more information on some of the other options road wise that are sort of adjacent to not specifically drainage, and kind of get us better, harder numbers and the options and how those two interact. Is that right? I find good numbers very, very helpful. I always want to work with really solid numbers. It helps you make decisions. I think we saw that even just with the solar, being able to make the best decision with the best numbers possible. And so I'm always most comfortable with the best numbers possible. And so and I think the mayor already said that. So I'm sorry if you feel like I just summarized. I just want to clarify kind of what I was looking for the next one.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Smith.
I think it's maybe a year ago, maybe longer than that now, we did a town hall for a lot of the residents in Aurora Park downstairs, and a survey was passed out and we collected survey results. One of the questions on there, I think, was, how many folks are interested in basically paying special assessments in order to get the roads paved? And I don't remember that being very many people that said they were willing or wanting to do that. I'm just wondering, am I remembering that correctly?
That's the way I remember it, that it was not, maybe, and don't quote me on the numbers because I don't remember them, but it was maybe 25-30% were willing to, and the rest said, no, they were not willing to pay for that. But don't quote me on that number because I don't remember it off the top of my head.
So, I haven't had anyone contact me and say, hey, yeah, I'd like you guys to really evaluate putting in paved streets and, spend time, and then, we'll pay for that with special assessments. I wonder, I'm just trying to decide, how much time should we spend evaluating that as an option if it's not something that, residents are asking us to do?
I'll say that putting together a cost estimate like that, and we can certainly help Ann with that a little bit too. It's only a couple hours worth of work to put together the estimate. It's not a dire,
Not another study.
Yeah, to get, like she's talking about, an order of magnitude cost from 1,000-foot view, that's pretty achievable without a lot of effort. Now, if you want to get into the weeds, probably the biggest challenge that we would run into is like she said, is evaluating the storm sewer as far as having the depth. That'll be the biggest challenge on checking the feasibility of that, because that's probably the first thing you do before you even spend the time figuring out what all the other costs are. Is, can you even do it? Can you even get the storm sewer there at a cost that's affordable? Because storm sewer box, you can spend money really, really fast on storm sewer box.
Okay, thank you. I just didn't want to spend in tens, dozens, hundreds of hours on something that there's no chance that we're going to move forward with. But having a little bit of information to be able to share would, if it's not hard to get that, sure would be good.
Okay. Any other questions for Garver Engineering or our city engineer? All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate all the efforts and the
Thank you.
explanation. It's good information. Next item on the agenda is Woodlawn Financial Update. Oh, I'm sorry. Was somebody wanting to speak? Yes.
Yes, you may. I
you
was
may.
looking for
Yes.
somebody to.
I hadn't seen anybody wanting to say they wanted to make comments. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, that's fine. I didn't really. Okay.
Okay. I'm Melanie Penner, 4100 North Baton. And I feel a lot of this is directed to your area, so I don't like you in the back of the room, because you feel we are complainers. We're not totally complainers. We're complaining about the streets, so to speak, but it is the maintenance. What is transpiring? What is putting on our roads? Which I want to show you. This is what's on our roads. Yeah. Take a look at it. You drive there, right there. You drive down that every day. What is this? That is limestone. Oh, just like that. Limestone. And I know, John, you have driven it.
Yep, I've driven it too. Yes, very familiar with it. Yes.
I know. All of it.
Or should I have one of my staff, should I have one of my staff members do that tomorrow?
We have trash barrels. You
Yeah,
can't tell what color they are. And it's just kind of disappointing that some employees, and I'm sorry, I don't have enough, I can get you some though, to do research on air pollution. Not only because of the dust and the health, but the pollution for everyone, the safety. And I don't know if any of you have ever been to Springdale Lakes, 143rd and Kellogg. Their streets are not paved. Do they have dust like we have? No. It's a matter of what rock solution you put on there. We've lived in our house for 30 years, probably the last 4 or 5 years. This dust is out of control. We never had this, right? Right. So it's not that we've got to have asphalt, we have to have concrete. There needs to be a change in the mix of what is going on our streets. And now our street, you come out of our driveway, you go down, here's the street. It used to be flat. I realize there needs to be a little bit of a cap or a arch to it, but it's crazy. The intersection of Batten and Harding and 40th is probably a foot higher than it was 4 or 5 years ago. And that's because of the maintenance. I don't know what's transpired there, but it just is not being done correctly. I don't know if it's the crew doing it, not being told how to do it, but a lot of it is the product. There's also a rock that can be done. We've talked to some out of Gas, Kansas. It is a white gray rock that does not give out the dust. And surely from past years, there's records as to what they put on the streets. It wasn't limestone that breaks down totally to this dust. And you just can't leave anything outside. You go outside, if you walk in your yard, you come in barefoot and you come in, you have to go back outside and wash your feet off. It's all total dust. And I grew up in the country just like you did. We did not have dust like this at all. We had dirt roads. They were graveled roads though, with gravel on them. And you get the right mix, that will not leave all of this dust. And safety, I think next doors, we posted some pictures there on next door. You can't even see a vehicle or a bus behind it. It's just ridiculous of how things have become to be. And that's the main thing. We love the setting, the rural part. It is the treatment of what is being put on the road that needs to change. It doesn't have to be asphalt. It does not have to be concrete. But that is our biggest complaint. But like I say, if you go to Springdale Lakes, they've got gravel roads also, but it is not the limestone on there.
okay. Thank you. We have, I do know our staff has looked at various options on this, and we'll continue to pursue options and see if there are some workable options. So, is anyone else would like to speak?
You left dust up here.
Call the city.
Okay. Hi, my name is Bonnie Stinson. I live at 3800 North Harding. And I appreciate you guys looking at this and taking the time. There's been a lot of money spent on this that it kind of sounds to me like you guys are going to do all this, spend all this money and look at it. And in the end, you're going to come back to us and say, well, we've done all the research. We're going to propose we put asphalt on there, leave the open ditches. And if you want that done, because that's how we're going to see it needs to be fixed, we're going to assess you that cost, special assessment. You're going to take out the bond. You're going to special assess us. And if people don't want to do that, then this is a dead issue. If I'm reading into this, sorry, but that's kind of the vibe I'm getting. That's how I'm feeling. Just from the conversation that's been had here, you guys are kind of talking in code. So I have a feeling there's something going on behind the scenes that I don't know about. Something about a $2 million bond to do a street. I never saw anything like that in the packet, but maybe I just missed it. I do want to tell you that there are dust abatements out there that I'm not so sure we would not be open to. I know that a lot of the rural counties do provide that service, and it might be a shared cost, but they do provide it. I sent Mayor Benage a link to a product, and I understand he has shared that with Ty. And I also have been providing road pictures of what's going on. The most recent one has been a bus coming down our road, and Mayor Benage did receive that, and so did Ty. And if you look at that, you cannot see really that bus. There's two little headlights. I actually put an arrow there. Now, I didn't send it to any of you, but I would be more than happy to. I think that the drainage problem, I don't know where you're headed down that road as far as Eagle Lake goes. I do know there's problems. I do know it floods, and I know it floods into Fawn Lake, and I know people downstream get that water. My neighbor across the street has a video of his pool flooding. He has not chosen to fill it in yet. The neighbor up by Eagle Lake has filled his pool in because of the flooding, and I guess you're aware of that. So I don't know where we're at on fixing that part of it. It sounded like Ken took it out and wasn't going to address that, or I don't know. I guess one of my questions too is of my concern. All the drainage comes down south and it goes to open ditches, and those open ditches that are not cared for start to grow trees in them. And that is what has happened on 37th Street on that corner property. There's trees growing in the ditch, big trees. And then it flows into the lake that goes under a reinforced concrete culvert under 37th. And I looked at the plat document, and it said that the owners of that corner lot at 37th and Oliver would be responsible for cleaning the lake out in the ditch. But I don't know who's cleaning it out now. I have taken pictures, and that culvert has got tree branches, big tree branches clogged up in it. It's had road construction, plastic, you name it. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody wasn't living under there by now. But it's just got a lot of stuff that is really gunked up under there, and nobody's cleaning it out that I can tell, and I don't know who's responsible. Behind 37th Street on the west side, there was a drainage ditch, and I think Ken even alluded to it in his report, that there was a drainage channel for it. It's overgrown now, so obviously it's of no value to anybody. But I think we're frustrated, and I think talking to a neighbor the other day, he said to me that I admire you going and trying to, talk to him and let him know about the problem. But it's like trying to roll a boulder uphill. So maybe that's what we're up against. I don't know. But I do know that if some of our tax money is going into the $500,000 you're putting towards streets, and we don't deserve any improvements. That wasn't made known when that whole thing was developed about road improvement, 500,000, 500,000, 500,000. They didn't tell us that if you live on a dirt road, you don't get any of that. You have to pay for your improvements. Everybody else that's got pavement roads can have it.
Thank you.
Frustration,
Yeah.
frustration.
Okay. So Ms. Stinson, your time's up. I think you knew that.
I thought you were getting a phone call.
So,
Okay,
just
that's fine.
so you understand where we're coming from and what we're doing here. There is no bond, $2 million bond
Okay.
out there about
All right.
about Aurora Park. Okay, we've not had any discussion
Okay.
like that. That
Okay.
number was thrown out tonight about $2 million. I think that's kind of the first time I ever heard that number.
Yeah, I
I've
was
heard
like,
other
what?
numbers, but but that's one of the reasons we asked that
Mhm.
be brought to ground, so we know a little better about what we're talking about. The other issue is we've been listening to what Aurora Park's concern is, and that's the reason we asked for this study to be done, because if you start working these ditches and you don't do them right, you'll create more problems than you'll solve, okay? And we don't want to do that. We want to do things that fix
I think
some
that's
problems
what's
for you,
happened to us.
for you,
Yeah.
instead of create more problems.
Right.
So our next step is to go on and put some numbers to this so we can see where it is and have a discussion about what can we do and what should we do and what is the right solution here that's best for all the citizens of Bel Aire.
Sure.
We do not intend, at least I can't speak for the council, but my own personal view is, and I imagine most of the council agrees with this, we do not intend to negate Aurora Park or any other development on maintenance. I think that's one of the problems that we've had, is that your area hasn't been maintained. We have other areas of the city that have the same problem.
Right.
They haven't been maintained. And I said at our last council meeting, to some degree, we feel like we're playing whack-a-mole, because we go fix one problem and there's another that pops up, because some of this stuff just needs some serious work on it. And so we want to get that done. We are paying attention to this. I realize it's slow and it's frustrating, and we can't just snap our fingers and make it happen today, but we do want to get some right solutions in place. So,
Well, I know you guys hired another public works staff person a few years ago. And one of the justifications in that, and it says right in it, so staff can do more work in Aurora Park. I know it said it because I've got it.
Okay.
And so now I'm wondering, that was in the 20 budget. I know there was problems getting the staffing filled, but still there was an additional worker hired supposedly that could do that. And we were going to contract all this mowing out, but it seems like the mowing is the same cost it was back in 18. I mean, I kind of tracked it.
Okay.
Now I might be wrong on my numbers, but if I am, I'm not that far off, I don't think, because I've taken all the appropriations and plopped the numbers in. Okay, we could do
We
this
still
all
have
night.
more.
You need to come for a slumber party.
I'll be brief.
okay.
I'm Gary Burrow. I'm at 4046 North Harding. I live right in the middle of that issue right there, and I'm the one that maintains that ditch there. You almost need mountain climbing gear to do it anymore. And I think one of the frustrations that comes along is I feel like I've talked with Ann every spring and fall for a couple years now about just doing something. And I think most of us love this neighborhood, and we're there to do the work to maintain the ditch if it's maintainable. It's very difficult to maintain my ditch myself. I have this steel weed eater whole garb I go down there with, but I'm telling you, it's difficult to do it right now. And it's supposed to be mowable, I believe, is what the goal for the city is to at least make them mowable. Some people cannot get to those ditches and the weeds grow as high as until, I don't know if they get sick of it or what. And I don't think any of us, and I hate to speak for everybody, wants curbs and gutters. And we know that that's not going to fly. And I think Councilman Smith is right on the deal about wasting more time going down a road that I'm not sure anybody wants to go down. And correct me if I'm wrong. We all hate the dust. Yeah, we all live there. We've lived there for years, and we know we have dust. That's part of the charm of the area too, but it's too much right now, and it's more than it has been for years in the past. So we need some sort of a feasible cost to do something about that, some other substrate on top, or maintaining it better, or find out what it costs to put asphalt on it and see if we can afford to put the money down. Maybe it's $25 a month. I don't know what it would get down to, if anything. The neighborhood is really building up. There's new properties and houses being built in there, and people are maintaining them really nicely. There's a few that aren't, but I feel lucky to live there. And if we could just get a little bit more attention in it, which I think you're doing right now to help us maintain those ditches, it'll help a lot. And doing something about the road and the dust. I've been on your side. I understand what it's like on both sides, and I thank you for listening.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Is there anyone else? Oh,
Sylvia Fort, 4072 North Harding. I want to thank Gary Bro for cutting the spillway a lot of times. He should get Citizen of the Year or Maintenance Worker of the Year award. One of the problems that we have is we are held responsible for maintaining the ditch. It's not the city. And I went before the council a few years ago talking about a neighbor who received a letter from the city that she would be fined if she didn't mow the ditch. She was a lot older than I am. So she was probably maybe in her 80s, 90s. And her husband had cancer at the time. But I was on dirt roads over around Hutchinson and Heston last week. They do not have the dust the way we do. I happened to be going to the allergy asthma specialist, and I showed her what we had. And she said, oh, you need to be wearing a mask anytime you go outside. This is becoming more and more a problem as we get more traffic. I think some of them are hiding from the law because they kind of speed through and create a lot of dust. And incidentally, tonight when I was leaving, we have our recycling bins and everything else. One car went through the intersection. I live over at where all the roads come together at 40th Street. And it created dust. I almost didn't see a truck. I saw it in time, and then I kind of eased out because the sight triangle was messed up by the dust and everything. Eased out, and there was another truck, and these were red trucks, and you couldn't see them in the dust. So we definitely need to have something done about the dust. It is a safety hazard. There's no two ways about it. And if there is a wreck because of it, we'll all probably be witnesses. Thank you.
thank you.
I'm Deborah Jenkins, and I live on Parkwood. And you made several suggestions, and what about $2 million this? What about $2 million that? What about curbs, sidewalks? How much are they willing to spend? All right, I know all of you live on a brand new, newly paved road that the city has covered for you. I want to know how much each one of you are paying for that individually. Are you going to be assessed a special assessment for having your brand new streets when we're not even getting hardly any consideration for even the right combination of road dirt? You get everything handed to you because you're on the council, perhaps. Maybe because you voted for it, because you get behind the scenes and you get what you need. Well, we're fed up. We're tired of it. We don't want to be the redheaded stepchild anymore. I'm sorry, both of you. I don't mean redheaded. But we're fed up. We want to be heard. We want to be listened to. And we do not want to be tossed aside because we don't live on a paved road. Or we don't live in your neighborhood. We don't live where you guys do. We chose this, but you guys are choosing what we breathe, and we're not happy. That's where it's got to end. Okay. Told you it'd be short.
Thank you. Just a clarification about one thing you said. There is no development in Bel Aire where the residents have not paid for the paving of their road. I paid special taxes for my road in my area, and I think that's the case in every subdivision in Bel Aire that has paved roads in the residential areas. Okay, if there's an exception to that, I'm not aware of it. I think everybody has.
So you brand new paved this year, you got a special
The maintenance, the city at large pays for, and that's the reason for this study that we asked for, because we understood that the maintenance has been a problem in Aurora Park, and we need to make sure we do the right things and not create more problems. So that's why we have the study. We finally got the study today, and so now we're ready to start talking about what can we do to make it happen.
You just got done. You didn't get a special assessment for that brand new paving of those roads that were just done.
You mean for
So
the
there's no new
overlay?
paving done. There's no new paving done. Yeah, that's. Yeah, we did have to rebuild Baton because the road was in such bad shape that was the only option, because it been neglected. I'm sorry?
Is it like 45th Street?
I don't know which one you're
45th
talking about.
Street.
53rd. Yeah, it was pretty bad.
Those are all on the list of projects
But
to
there are a
do.
lot of projects like that have to be done, and it's going to take some time to get there. So, all right.
I just had
Yes.
a brief thing to say about bringing new blood that we're getting into Aurora Park. We're seeing turnovers of homes, and that is super exciting to me, just to get some new younger kids in there. I feel like when we have a road like that, for one, I feel like people might be pretty disappointed once they do move in, that they realize they have to deal with the dust. And two is that I feel like when you have a road like that is that dusty, it's hard to justify keeping everything so clean, because it's so hard to keep your house clean, our pool clean, even my landscaping. I have to take the hose because just to get the junk off. Yes, everything builds up. So I guess my point is that I love that we're having new people come in, because we've been there 20 years. We can only maintain our property, hopefully another 20, who knows? But there are big properties. They do take a lot of maintenance, but I want to see that as these people start selling their homes, I want to bring new people in, and it's a gem. It really is a gem. We circled that neighborhood for probably 2 years before we finally found a house that was for sale, and we were willing to take any house. We got one of the best, I think, but we're super excited about the house we have, and we don't intend to leave. But I want to see new people coming in. I want to see them wanting to be in this neighborhood and feeling like we can get these houses turned over. There's some that are a little older and need some upkeep, and I want to see that they're excited to be there and that they don't regret moving in. And we had some young kids across the street that bought that house and fixed it up, and they turned around and sold it for over $100,000 profit. It was fantastic. I'm so excited to see that. I want to see that continue. The dust is worse than I've ever seen it. We've been there 20 years, and it just gradually happened. Yeah, it just gradually happened, and I've realized how bad it's gotten. So I do feel like we'd all be really excited to see a better mix, and I want to see new people moving into our neighborhood. Let's keep it alive. Let's bring people to that. Let them know about that little gem they have. So
I'm going to tell you something. You don't know. I just have to interject this. Her daughter got married, and her daughter got married
In my
on
backyard.
their property. Okay.
Good.
And so guess what they did? They hired a water truck
Yeah,
to come and water down the road. You didn't tell them that.
I didn't.
And I don't know how much it costs, but he had a truck. I watched it. I thought, oh my gosh, she's hired a truck.
We had to because
But
it
it
would
was
have been
so
ruined.
dusty,
Everything
right.
we had done and the people coming, it would have been awful.
So they actually paid to have a water truck come up and down. And he did it several times in
Yes.
several hours before the wedding came. It worked.
It did. It did. It kept, so that we know what it can
Yes.
feel like
Yeah.
not to have all that dust.
But in order for them to have at their
my
nice,
own
and they
home,
do
yeah.
have one of the nicer yards in
We worked
the
hard.
whole.
We
Yes,
worked
I
hard.
know.
So, anyway,
Thank you.
for listening.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
I'm Carolyn Gunsman. I live at 29 East 39th. I know several people in our neighborhood have fought their property tax increases on the basis of our roads. So you're losing money on property tax being adjusted because of the condition of the roads. Just so you know.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor and Council, my name's Leon Amy. I live at 4170 North Parkwood Lane, very near the dead end at the north end. I'm the second house back from that dead end on the east side of the road. And I wanted to speak to just two things, but I want to thank you for your assessment of all of the problems. And there's a lot of issues I understand that you're balancing. And I appreciate your work on this whole project. A few months ago, there was a discussion here about gravel versus river sand on the roads. And I don't know exactly when it was, but I would guess about 2 months ago or so, the city did put a thin layer of a crushed rock on our roads, at least on Parkwood. I really haven't examined the other roads, but and to my amazement, I thought that it did an excellent job of reducing the washboarding. Now, I think it's this exact same mix that you brought. But there's something about the crushed rock that packs down better and holds the surface flatter better. I don't know how to explain it, but I believe it's true. I did still see a place or two occasionally that had a little washboarding on it, but in the past, we've had long stretches of Parkwood that would be washboarding. So I'm satisfied that even though it was a very thin layer, I think it made a difference. But it also, unfortunately, did make it dustier, I think, just because of the way the product is. Another thing about the dust, the road was in pretty good shape. It had packed down pretty flat, and the grader came and graded the road a few days ago. I could tell you what day it was, but anybody know? Tuesday? And after the grader had run up and down Parkwood, honestly, it was like driving in baby powder. It was dustier than I've ever seen it, and I've lived there since 1983 at my house at 4170 North Parkwood. So there's some trade-offs here, apparently. If there's a product that stabilizes the road like the crushed gravel does, but doesn't cause the dust, I don't know what it is. And then the other thing that I thought about was maybe the weather should be taken into consideration before grading's done and the condition of the road, because the road was packed down fairly flat. It was in pretty good condition, I believe, before the grader came, and it was still flat when the grader was done. I mean, it was smooth when the grader was done, but it was really powdery. Really powdery. And I think that's why everyone is saying it's dustier now than it's ever been, because just in the last few days, I think it's dustier than it's ever been because of the combination of dryness and the product that's on the road and the fact that the grader ran when it was dry and just everything just broke up into a powder. So there's a lot of things that I can't control and a lot of things that you guys are talking about, and I appreciate it. One thing that I can control though is how fast I drive on my road. And I look in my rear view mirror a lot, and under normal circumstances, if I drive 15 miles an hour, I have a fairly small cloud of dust behind me. If I drive faster than that, it gets proportionally bigger the faster I drive. So that's just something that I've noticed. And the last few days since the grader ran, in order to keep that cloud low, I have to drive 10 miles an hour because it's that much powder here. So it's just some things I wanted to throw out. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the information. We appreciate your input. Is there any other citizens? I think we've probably had most everybody that's here speak, but I don't want to cut anybody off on this. If not, is there any other discussion the council would like to have on this subject, or I know we're going to revisit this next month, but if you want to say anything now or ask any questions now, it's fine.
Well, I've got a question I've asked before, and I think I know the answer, but I have asked if we could lower that speed limit on the road, and I'm thinking the answer is no. Is that correct, Ty?
It can be done. The speed limits are usually set by engineering and PD, and so we could have Ken look at that about lowering the speeds. Because the last gentleman that spoke is right. I went over and drove him last week, and that's the same thing I noticed was if I was 10, 15, there was a lot less dust, and then the people that were going 20 and 30 was kicking up a lot of dust. So I did notice that on the speed limit.
Right. I was wondering if that was the same restriction as we had with Rock and other roads, that we have to get an engineering study to be able to change the speed limit.
Yeah, that's typically the way we handle those, good state statute.
And a secondary question, can we insert speed bumps?
We could stop grading.
Stop grading. Back to the
That might
washboard.
solve several problems.
Well, I don't think anybody slowed down for a washboard. I never did in my life.
Mr. Mayor.
We have two city of Wichita dump trucks. They're pretty clockwork about coming around. They'll either come off of 37 and go down Harding up to 40th and out, or they'll come down 40th and come down Harding and go off of 37. And I can stand out there and almost set my watch to them. I don't know what they're doing. But
Must
they
be
follow
lunchtime.
each other and they just drive on our roads, drive on our roads. And
Mr.
it's not Bel Aire.
I had a
Mr. Smith?
question for our city engineer. Some of the discussion we've had tonight is just made me wonder. I feel like, we've been talking about the roads and the drainage in Aurora Park for a little while, and, at least a couple of years since I've been on council, and trying to come up with some creative solutions to do things. And I feel like those roads have gotten more attention from staff in terms of the amount of aggregate that's being put down, the maybe frequency of grading. I guess my question is it possible that we're making the dust problem worse by maintaining the road more frequently and adding more aggregate to it?
Yes. I'm not a gravel road expert, but I have, worked with our guys who've been to several different gravel road maintenance classes. And that is always a possibility that too much is a bad thing. It's very hard for us to balance the citizen concerns with what we've been taught at our classes that we've been to. We've tried multiple different things. Some work, some don't. You can never control the weather. We always try and get out there, shortly after it's rained. But the last gentleman kind of hit the nail on the head. And I don't know the condition of the roads prior to the grading. But that is something that I'm going to talk to my staff about tomorrow, because I think we are headed in the right direction overall. As far as the gentleman said, the roads are in pretty decent condition. The rock that they've been putting down seems to pack it down pretty hard. So I'm not sure what preceded the grading, but Ty and I drove the roads, I think it was last week, and yeah, they were very dusty. It's the dustiest I've ever seen it. The majority of the times when I get the dust complaints, oh, the dust is really bad, the dust is really bad, I go out and drive it. And if you drive 15, 20 miles an hour, there's a very little small trail of dust behind you. So speed is a lot of it, condition of the roads, the dampness of the roads, whether it's rained or not, or whether it's been dry for months. But yeah, I do think that there is a condition of too much maintenance. And Ted could probably speak to how much money we've put on those roads this year. I know some of it has gone to, I believe some of it has gone to the road behind the public works shop, but I'm not sure if that was pulled out separately or not. But
well, I know we've certainly, we've been trying to make improvements there, and I appreciate staff's efforts and what they've been trying to do to address some of these concerns. I also understand that we for whatever reason, it sounds like there's a unanimous consensus that something has actually made the dust worse. And so I'm trying to reconcile that in my mind with, hey, we're doing more maintenance, but it's getting worse. So maybe we were better off not maintaining it at all. I'm not sure. We probably need more information there.
And I think I'm wondering if part of this time is because we didn't top dress it with anything, because we are pretty far over budget. I don't know if that's part of the issue with the bad dust or if it's just the particular material. I know Dave had mentioned it's years and years of limestone that has been built up through the years, but I know when we've graded it in the past, it hasn't been this bad. So not quite sure. It's a work in progress. I mean, you have to make mistakes in order to learn. And unfortunately, that's kind of where we're at in this particular really bad dust situation. I do acknowledge it.
A question I have, and the gravel road I grew up on, I'm not sure is super comparable, because it was like you could drive 55 on it, and so that mean everybody drove 65. At least I did, and so it's not the same situation as Aurora Park. But yeah, I have a funny story about scaring the daylights out of my high school girlfriend, but I should probably not tell that one. I remember there would be a pattern like this. It would get hotter and drier, and the dust would be super, super out of control. And then it would rain, and it would become an absolute mud. I mean, so these are not that well maintained. It would become an absolute mud city horribleness. So bad, it would get so horribly washboardy. And then eventually they'd put this white rock on there. So then if you tried to drive 65 over that, you'd kill yourself. And so you had to slow down. And then it would be good, and it'd be flat and be okay. But then it would dry out, and then it becomes super, super, and it would just like this is cycle. So what I'm wondering is, are we having longer dry spells now than we have in years past that is exacerbating the dust? Because if watering the road is so helpful in taking out the dust, which I don't doubt it is, what do we know about how much moisture we're getting on that road just from nature in recent years compared to what we did 20 years ago?
I don't have that information. I don't typically track it, but I can tell you we should be getting some moisture tonight, which will help.
I do know our utility advisory committee tracks the rainfall, and so far year to date, I think last report I saw, we were like a quarter inch behind for the year. So we're on average, we're not far behind on rain, but I don't know how much that's contributing or not.
And then depending on what time of the year, if that happens, when the moisture comes in which part of the year, if you have a long dry spell in the summer, I mean, my remembering, if you had a really long dry spell in the summer, the roads got just a complete. Now that I can't remember the last time it rained, so this could be a completely wrong assessment of why it's gotten dry this time. So I was just kind of wondering if we thought about that. It may not be relevant at all. I'm not sure.
That's one of the issues. We do seem to be getting larger storm events less frequently instead of the smaller, more frequent storm events. So that could be part of it. But the cycle that you had described is pretty typical. We do get a lot more complaints in the summer when it's dry.
Did you have a comment?
Okay. My name is Betty Amy, and I also live in 4170 North Parkwood, and we've lived there almost 40 years. I don't know if we have longevity or not in this room. But when we first moved in, when it rained, you were going down a mud slurry. And so I do appreciate the fact that limestone has been built up on our roads because it's not nearly as slick as it used to be 38 years ago. So that is definitely an improvement. However, I also agree with all the problems of the dust at this particular moment. I'd like to see some good old sand on there, you know, big sand, not little sand, big sand. Bigger. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, would you mind if I throw a couple comments in real quick?
Go right ahead, Mr. Lee.
Okay. Well, I just wanted a couple of things that have come up on the speed limit study. I will talk with Mike Spade. He's our traffic expert. He's the kind of guy that we would bring in to talk about traffic studies. My gut feel is when you get into the speed limits we're talking, that it's probably more of a political decision and less of an engineering decision when it comes to under 30 miles an hour kind of thing. I don't think a speed limit study is likely to really produce a result that's going to be anything but, hey, you guys need to figure out what your citizens want. So I'll just throw that out there. I'll talk to him about it to get his feel. But normally the speed limit studies, like you said, you put cameras out, you measure 85th percentile speed and those type of things. But in lower speed level situations like this, I'm not sure what data we would be able to get out of it. That's going to be more. It'll probably be more subjective rather than objective. But I will talk to him about that tomorrow to get a gauge on that. On the question about over manipulation of the road, the bad thing about the limestone type rock, it is fairly soft, and the more you manipulate it, the more it'll break down, the more fines you'll generate. So you could certainly, I could see a situation where in an attempt to do a good job of providing a really nice road to drive on, you could certainly create a situation where you're generating more dust by virtue of the rock breaking down as it gets manipulated more and more. Now, the suggestion she just made about bringing in sand, bringing in alternative materials, I think Ann talked about bringing in a different kind of overtopping. Those kind of things can help out. But I would say that without a doubt, the limestone type rock does break down the more you manipulate it. So just wanted to throw those couple of comments out. So
Thank you.
I didn't.
Hard to.
So that's what they put on. Is there a speaker up here? Something just started kind of, and I hope it's not the roof. I looked up.
I hope it's not the roof either.
I didn't hear anything, so I don't know.
Now, according to the radar, it's not raining that hard right now.
Okay. All right.
Give it 20 minutes.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Okay. So we will talk about this next month, some more workshop and with some more information and see if we can't come up with some ideas. Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Elsop.
Yeah, I guess I had a couple of comments. I guess in responding to the public comment, I mean, we certainly recognize up here that there has been neglect of Aurora Park and the gravel roads over the course of many years in Bel Aire, and that was the roads overall in Bel Aire is one of the big reasons why all of us were elected up on this and this board. One of our biggest motivations to run was to help mitigate those problems, try to fix roads as much as we can, try to focus money on the roads. So I recognize, Aurora Park has kind of a unique geography, and with the large lots and the gravel roads and the history, and we are all sensitive to that, and I do appreciate all the feedback. It's coming down to, there's a big price tag to make it right, and we're trying to do our due diligence. On this council, we've taken the kind of a general philosophy on focusing on a couple of big projects one year, and then the next year focusing on kind of more smaller projects. And recently Batten was our big ticket project in the most recent history. And, so I just want to say that, we're trying to do what we can. This topic today was focusing on the ditches, and Obviously, the dust has been re-highlighted as another problem, but it has been my understanding that dust has been on the radar screen of the city and of Ann and her work at Public Works, and they're taking the measures that they think helps that. So it sounds like it may not be sufficient, but it has been addressed over time since I've been on this council. I recognize that more needs to be done. I also just did want to, respond. So during the public comment, there were 2 separate accusations made against this council, and I just wanted to speak to that. So one accusation was made that, quote, something was going on behind the scenes. I'm not sure how how best to respond to that, other than say that's strikes me as a false accusation. I can assure you there's nothing going on behind the scenes in regards to handling of Aurora Park or the gravel roads or any of these topics that were before us today. So I just want to categorically just deny that I don't know where that comes from. It was a baseless accusation as far as I'm concerned. And I think everybody up here should have the opportunity to deny that, because I don't know why that was made. I understand there's frustration from people, and they're addressing, and I think we're trying to make a good, sensible path of them. So the other accusation that was made was that because we're on the council, that somehow the roads that we live on are getting a focus on repaving, and the mayor partially addressed that. But I mean, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I know, I have never given any preference to staff or to anybody in the city to prioritize where I live or where anyone else. Our public works engineer, she provides a list of all of the, it's quite an exhaustive list of all of the damaged roads and kind of their level of where they are. And we've seen that list. It's a big list. This council has always deferred to the city and the judgment of our engineer and the public works people to kind of assess what should get prioritized. And it's our job up here to make decisions on how the money is going to be spent. And I touched on that, how our general philosophy has kind of been to do like some little projects and then some big projects and kind of try to balance it out as best we can. I think we all are acting in good faith up here. And I just felt that it was kind of going too far with those 2 accusations, and I felt they needed to be addressed specifically. So I'll open it to others to speak if they want, but that's what I have to say about that.
Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I agree with Councilor Alfonso. I mean, I do probably, I'm assuming that the behind the scenes thing could be taken multiple different ways and less or more charitable, uncharitable interpretations. And I took that as I interpreted the most charitable way possible, but there's certainly not meetings before the meetings. So we don't have anything. The only person I've ever talked to about Aurora Park in any detail is when I call and ask questions about Ty for the meeting. And of course, so there's no discussion between us other council members about those things. So I don't think there was an intention necessarily, but maybe as someone listening, they could have interpreted that though. That's not how I took it, but I think it's important to clarify that we do not, the council members don't discuss these things together. And I appreciate you pointing that out specifically because I think it could have easily been interpreted that way. So thank you.
Mr. Mayor, the only thing that I'll add to that, I think, is, it may seem odd sometimes, when you see the prioritization list and you see some of the focus on, like, maybe spending some money on doing some pavement maintenance here in Central Park or in other areas that maybe are newer. And, something that I didn't know before I was on council is some of the economics behind why it's really important to maintain some of the new roads. $1 spent in maintenance is like $1,000 saved in replacement later on. I know those aren't the right numbers, but it's significant orders of magnitude. And so, this year we spent our big project money on replacing Batten. And the reason that Batten had to be replaced is because that maintenance wasn't done on it. And so this is a really tricky balance for the council and the staff to set up, is how do we not dig ourselves into a deeper hole and also work on digging ourselves out of the hole at the same time. And so not having more roads get to the failed state is often prioritized over a lot of the replacements, because once a road's failed, it's got to be completely replaced, just like Batten was. And that's, so expensive to do. And we already have so many roads that are in a failed state. We can't allow the newer roads to also get into a failed state, so where we end up having to replace them. So I think it's been a little while since we talked about that. And it is a little counterintuitive to see maintenance on some of the newer roads when there's so much, completely failed road that also needs maintenance. And that's just a systemic problem that we have here in Bel Aire. That's why I'm excited to continue to see more money dedicated to streets. It's still not enough. There's still a tremendous opportunity and a lot more work to do, but we are making progress, and I think it's going to keep getting better. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, one other thing I was thinking about on why it seems like some of these gravel roads are so hard. Some of the cement roads, it's like, okay, every 5 years you'll slurry seal them, and that's it, right? Like that's what you do. It's easy. There's this pattern that you do with them every so many years. You throw the slurry seal on them. That's what you do. Everybody in every city does it if they're doing it right and it's clear. When we get to these gravel roads and we have to think about, the whole presentation tonight was just supposed to be about drainage. We don't worry about drainage on any other of the streets. And I find it hard to wrap my mind around those quickly. The slurry seal decision's somewhat easy. Like you just list all the streets that have been, need to be done and you do them. But it's a lot of work trying to figure out all the nuances of the, the ditches and the gravel and the different kinds of maintenance and whatnot. I'm sure we have been taking forever on this, and I think this is part of why, because each time I get, bang my head to try to figure out what's the best thing, I think this is a harder decision to make than some of the simpler ones that we make.
All right. Thank you. Are we completed with this subject for now? Okay, I'm ready to go on. So let's go on to item C, the Woodlawn financial update. I think Mr. Lasher, are you going to talk about that?
It's just
Thank
a
you.
really quick update, and we're going to know more in a couple of weeks when Woodlawn actually bids. But we just want to make you aware before we start talking about our next project of actually borrowing some money to do some street replacements. Is that and Ted created a spreadsheet for you that kind of just shows you what we're concerned about, and really is we're looking at what we based the project on financially, which again was several years ago when it got in the pipeline and then got engineered and bid and everything. So it's been 4 years now, I think. But we were guesstimating the project around 6.8 million. And then, of course, KDOT's going to take a share of that, a majority share of it, 80%. And we were looking at about a 20-year bond at $125,000. Well, we were kind of taken aback when we got some information from KDOT that they were sending it out for bid, and they had an estimated engineer's estimate, which you see all the time. And as Ted alluded to, costs have really been skyrocketing. They came in at about 10 million is what they were guesstimating. So that changes over doubles what our bond would be. So we went to MKEC and said, hey, this is kind of scary. Where's these numbers coming from? And so they looked at the numbers and they knew that costs were up, but they felt pretty good that based on the bids they're seeing and stuff, that it should come in over what our guesstimate was, but not nearly what KDOT was estimating. So they were thinking, based on what they've seen, our annual cost for 20-year bond may go from 125 to 175, so about 50,000 a year, which is still a concern, but not nearly as what KDOT was guesstimating. But like I said, we won't know until that bids actually come in what that dollar amount is.
And I'll just piggyback real quick. Page 18, I have 125, but I'm a little try to be a little smarter. And all my forecasts that we've been dealing with for the last 3 months have been 150,000 a year. So that it's more of if everything comes in as MKC's rolls, we'd be $25,000 a year over what we're estimating currently. As you know, this is an attempt note, so we're not going to see this go on the books until 2024. Where's interest rates going to be? I have 3%. Hopefully they still remain where they're at right now, 1.75. So we might even make that up, with a lower interest rate. It might come out all right. The scariest thing about all this, of course, is, and I don't know if Ann's still here, but to throw something out there like $10 million is interesting and scary at the same time. I don't know if they're being cautious, very, very cautious. We couldn't get a line item on that because, obviously if someone gives you a bill, you'd say, where are you coming up with this 10 million? I don't want to talk too much because Ann's probably better at this, but what this does for me personally, is really makes us pause and wait till this lets and sees exactly what we're going to pay for it. So that's really what the update's all about, is where are these bids going to go?
At what point can we actually put the bond out? If we think interest rates are going to start bumping up, can we do it earlier?
Yeah, it's callable anytime, or anytime you can go. Just the maximum allow is 3-year temp notes, so, or really 4-year, but 3-year is when we do it. So
who all was given the $10 million number? Is that like a company, the bids that people get, so that like is KDOT going to bias the folks that are bidding on this with their engineer's estimate?
No, it was just that was just for our information. And I don't really know. Do you know why they gave us that number?
So the engineer, MKEC, put in an estimate when they submitted final plans to KDOT, and then KDOT's engineers and estimating folks do their own estimate. And so that's where this $10 million is coming from. And if I were a betting man, I would say that they put a fairly hefty percentage increase because of the way the current market is going. And I've even talked with Garver, and they're like, yeah, we haven't seen those numbers. They were kind of shocked at that as well. But we're not quite sure where that's coming from. It was in a letter that Ty had signed that does not commit us to anything, but it says we acknowledge. And Ty and Ted could speak to that letter further, because all three of us kind of went round and round on that several times.
I told Ty not to sign anything, but I believe when we got clarification is if we get the bid, we have options. If it does come in at 10 million, we can sit and say.
Yeah, we just had to acknowledge the estimate and for it to go forward to be bid. And so it was just a simple signature. Then we cleared it with them that, well, what if it comes in and we're not happy with a $10, $12 million bid? And they said, then you don't accept the project or sign any contracts. So that gives us the authority to see what they are. And if we're comfortable, or if you're comfortable with it, after we see the bids and the company, even though it may be a little higher, we can move forward. And if it's 10 million or 12 million, and you say that we're not prepared to pay for that, then we just, or you would deny all the bids. But we just wanted you to kind of know that going into our second discussion on streets, because we were looking at borrowing $3 million to do some major street improvements. And unfortunately, we may have to spend some of that on Woodlawn, based on the cost of Woodlawn may come into. So that's why we wanted to share that information, just to give you a heads up. And like I said, we'll know in 2 weeks, 22nd.
22nd.
22nd. So we'll know for sure then. It'll come to you to discuss.
So are you recommending we just hold off on the streets discussion for a little while, depending on do we want to talk about this whole bunch right now and then we're not going to do anything because of the Woodlawn thing, or we're just clarifying what you're recommending?
So what you remember when you approved the resolution to start moving forward on the issuing of that 3 million, and you could stop or move forward or change it or whatever. We're recommending move forward because we may need some of that. But the issue is that we may not be able to do the 3 projects we were hoping to do. Or we could still do those, but the understanding is that debt service will be there, and the debt service on Woodlawn may go up.
Are you suggesting that we would use some of the $3 million bond to also be added to the funds that we're temp noting for Woodlawn? Or is this about the annual payments that we'll make on debt service in total? You're saying we would not issue the $3 million in bonds because we're going to do a bigger temp note for Woodlawn?
So that's the question that we'll have to talk, or that you'll have to talk through, is that if Woodlawn comes in more, and if you want to do the 3 projects at 3 million, then we'll come back with an estimate on what that debt services will be, and then you'll have to be comfortable with that.
Didn't that 3 million also include the solar project?
Yeah.
So we can subtract that price out for now. Give us a little more room, wiggle room. It was $250,000 or something, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, really, we're talking, and yeah, we can slice it any way you want, but so we had allotted $150,000 a year for Woodlawn, and we had $230,000 a year for this whatever projects we want to do. If it's a little less, that's fine too. So that totals $380K a year in debt service. If Woodlawn somehow comes in at 10 million, we spend $350K, then we only got 30K. That changes the game a little bit. Again, if it comes in 25,000 over, then there's your argument of, well, that was the solar panel, that kind of argument of where the money's at. So that's our concern. But as Ty alluded to, really the only time you're going to incur expense from here on out, if you wanted to still discuss streets, we're not going to get in front of S&P will charge us the rating agency. That's the only upfront cost of issuance we have before we actually go out to sell. So if we don't like market conditions for any reason, it's better to be prepared to go out than unprepared and a major shift happen. So it might not be a bad idea to have a discussion on it, just so we're prepared if we wanted to act fast. We've already had kind of the budget discussion of what we want to do.
And I think the big question really to discuss tonight is, based on streets, is 53rd Street. I know several of you have talked to me about, should we close it? Should we close it through traffic? Are we going to fix it, or what are we going to do with it? We're getting complaints about it, obviously, because it just continues to fail. So I guess we need to know how, are you comfortable moving forward with that, with at least 2 million? Do we need to look at closing it?
Are we done with Woodlawn? Did we just kind of took another jump to another street? Are we done with the Woodlawn discussion?
Yeah.
Because
So
I
the
have one
Woodlawn,
more
that's
question about Woodlawn.
Yeah, the Woodlawn is just a heads up.
Okay. I noticed today they put asphalt down and opened Woodlawn. How soon will we be removing all the work zone and road closure signs? Because it's going to be a couple of months till we start, if we get decent bids.
I was told that they would be removed today. So if they have
They're
not
still up.
already been removed, then they should be removed tomorrow.
Okay, and the 30-mile-an-hour speed zone. I know people are just wanting to get back to normal for a while if they can.
They
Certainly.
won't be able to drive 30 on that. There's some dips in there that you won't
Yeah,
want to hit it at 40.
That new asphalt they put in is a little bit low. They shorted themselves on their order, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a dip there right at Danbury, I think. That's pretty significant. So, yeah. Okay.
Okay, done with
Move on
Woodlawn.
to streets and what we're going to do. So I really do believe if you've not driven down 53rd in the last couple of weeks, you would be shocked at the condition it's in. It's I know the Public Works did some things on it here a couple months ago. They knew it was temporary, and it's already past its time. I personally think that until we come up with a permanent solution that we would be wiser as from a safety issue to close that street to through traffic. Now, there are people live down there, so you have to keep it open for local traffic, but
Well, you've
through
got
traffic.
development going on back in there too,
Yeah.
so you gotta let them out.
Yep. But the through traffic, just close it until we can do a real fix.
Mr. Mayor, yeah, I agree. I mean, there's craters there and it's dangerous. And if we don't have the money to do, the short-term fix that keeps it safe for a while. And yeah, I agree. I mean, you're going to get a lot of complaints about the school,
Yep.
And my family's in that boat. It's, closing it down is going to cause further disruption, but it's a safety thing. And
Worst thing to have happen is a bus get down in there and to tip over
it's
because
bad.
of that road condition.
Can we totally close that one bad section that's a quarter mile, or will we block somebody from getting to where they need to be? I mean, when we did Woodlawn, people found their way around. Okay, so if we don't totally block it someplace, people are still going to use it.
Oh, yeah.
So that's why I'm asking this question. If we pick that worst section of road and put barricades up all the way across so people know they can't use the road, can we do that?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that, and the reason you're talking about it is for temporary closures. The engineer can do that, police chief can do that, but if we're going to do this until it's repaired, it needs to be a council action. So yeah, you could totally close the road. You could close it to through traffic only. It would be up to you.
I guess my question wasn't quite clear. There's a piece there that's really bad. Can we block that piece off and still get everybody access to where they need to go? Some people might have to come in from the west and other people might have to come into the east, but if we close that, do people still have the access they need?
So that'd be closing it to through traffic, basically.
So close it
yeah.
to through traffic and enforcing that by blocking that worst section off.
That section is too large, and you would be blocking access to homes as well as the two developments that are going in. So I don't think that you could just specifically close off that worst section.
Okay, because last time I drove down there, I thought it was mostly west of where the new development was.
I think it's spread out.
It is kind of, there's,
Okay.
Let me make a
there,
suggestion.
there's big
driven down
potholes
it.
throughout.
Rather than us trying to engineer it here, let me
Okay.
make a suggestion. Ann, would you please look at that and see if there's any opportunity for that and bring it back to us at city council next week? And
Yes,
because we can't take any action tonight anyway, so.
I will
With the map,
bring,
please.
I was just gonna say, I'll get a map, probably 11 by 17 and kind of circle where you
Yeah.
can see where driveways are on the aerial, and then I'll
If there's
circle
an
where
opportunity,
the areas
great.
are.
If not, okay, then we
If
know.
we find that
Okay?
maybe there's one spot we have to patch to get people access and still keep it closed, we could.
We
you
can
know, look at
certainly,
that
I mean,
too.
and we can certainly patch it at any time. We can hire PP&J to come out. It's a matter of, does the council want to spend $30,000 to $50,000 to patch a road for half a year, 6 months to a year while we're getting 53rd designed, and if there's money.
Yeah.
But
We
I'll
don't-
certainly bring it back to
We're
the
not going to
council
want to,
meeting.
but we may have to. So
I
I
was
think
gonna
we
say,
need
I'm
a
not a-
recommendation.
Yeah, that's what
Against that.
I would like to know recommendation. What is your short-term, midterm thoughts on what you think we should do?
To spend $50,000 to put off spending $2 million a year, I'm not opposed to that idea.
Sure.
Unfortunately, I don't think that's what we're looking at. Because I think we spent 50,000, it lasted 6 months, right?
And
Okay,
I-
that's the question. How long would it last? What could we do that would get us just a little farther down while we say this is what we're going to do and we get our design work done on that road?
And I think a lot of the discussion is really going to turn on where Woodlawn comes in as to how much money there is.
Hmm.
And so I'll certainly bring a map for the next council meeting next Tuesday. And then I would hazard to say that we should have this on the agenda for the workshop to discuss it in a little bit more detail. I can have numbers as far as cost estimates from companies to see how much it would take to patch it in this condition right now. Unfortunately, with the construction going on at the two subdivisions, Bristol Hollows and Chapel Landing Third, we're going to keep getting these potholes, and there's really not much you can do about that. And it's, you have to do that concrete base in order for that patch to hold up.
Well, and that's where I kind of like exploring the idea that Councilmember Welch had thrown out on, is there a way to fully close a part of the road so that at least that construction traffic would have to use only part of the road, and that narrows down the place that you're having to get out there and patch every week or every month in order to keep it safe?
And I'll certainly take a look at that, and probably laying out on a map would help a lot. But at this point, I think that the Chapel Landing third would go west and Bristol Hollows would go east, and you're not really gaining anything. But I will put that on a map. I've been proven wrong before. It'll happen again, but I will do the research and bring it to you next Tuesday.
Right. We appreciate that. Thank you. And on the $2 million estimate here, how was that estimate arrived? Did you ask the engineering firm for that?
I actually asked Garver to help with that.
Did you?
And
Okay.
if you had any questions for Ken, I know they have a new program that they use for a lot of KDOT estimates that they used for a portion of this, and kind of went from there. So it is more detailed than what I typically put together, but
Okay, I
not-
want to ask then, did you make that road wider than 45th over by Cypress? for
yes,
this
I believe
2
we
million?
did.
Because, yeah, I see every day I drive down there and I see where people fell off because the road narrows.
Correct. And that was a decision of councils in the past to not widen the road, but just to keep it within that gravel stretch. And as kind of, not to belabor Aurora Park, but those roads are very narrow. So if we were to pave it, there may be some widening going through there to get it to a standard 2-lane width. So that's kind of the trade-off that you get when you're paving an existing gravel road. They're generally narrower than what you would put when on a paved road.
Is there any way to get a precise number for the 53rd Street all over to Woodlawn before we would go to bond? I'm wondering, is it possible to set this up so that we would have it bid before we go to bond, so that we could have a high degree of confidence or a perfect degree of confidence in what that cost is going to be? Because I would hate for us to expect this to be a $2 million project, and then with the current market conditions, it's $3 million, and we don't find out about that until it's, too late, and then we're up a creek.
So what I would need in order to do that is I would need some engineering design done on the road first, so we could have a precise estimate. And this would be actually to come up with a bid form and the quantities that we would send out to contractors. And then Garver would come through and put down for each unit price for excavation, for pipe, for concrete or asphalt, or for subgrade work. They would have a unit price for each of those items and can total it up to come down to a very close estimate.
And
The
But
other,
you're talking about a 2 to 3 month engineering project, aren't you?
Probably, yeah, that's a reasonable timeframe.
We have to do that anyway, right?
yes.
Well, yeah, but the bond, it comes up in 1st of October, if I remember
Well,
correctly.
that's the earliest we can do it.
What's the date on the bond?
You can really bond at any time. We're probably looking, if that's the case, we're probably looking at early spring issue.
But this council approved moving forward with the bond, and there was an October date on it, I remember. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
Yeah, that was just your bond calendar. It changes. It's changed right now.
It's the earliest. we
the
can
earliest
up
you
that
can-
bond.
yeah.
We can slide it farther into the future if we want to.
Yeah, Adam Pope, our financial advisor, creates that that schedule. You can, and October is usually where the principal is due as well. So we wouldn't have paid it this year anyway. So maybe that's what you saw as well.
But I just wanted to make sure that timing wise, we weren't creating a problem with that bond.
No,
Okay.
the market will accept our debt at any time.
Okay. Very good. What else do we need to talk about on streets? Do we need to go through these various options here, or what do you want? What do we
I'd like
want
to talk about the surface treatments in general, since we've got 4 projects like that. And I'd also like to make a comment about the last slurry seal. You came down Rushwood and did it, and it looked great. But the first time it rained, all those cracks that were down below opened up again, and now there's water coming up through the road everywhere. So I don't know if we really did a lot of good by doing that.
So what the slurry seal does is it helps preserve basically the top of the asphalt. It it puts a very thin lift that is not a structural lift on top of that in order to get rid of the cracks permanently. And it's not even permanently. When we go through and do the partial depth crack repair, which we're doing on Woodlawn and Oliver, it does help to get rid of those cracks. But with anything, those if there's any movement in the soil at all, those cracks reflect right on through to the surface.
Those are
So-
fairly large cracks, though, and the ones that I'm seeing in the street are,
The smaller ones, the
very
hairline
small,
cracks.
but they opened right back up.
Correct. And you're going to see that. And that's just kind of the nature of how it works.
So that led into my question of what do we think these two treatments, how good a quality they are that you've got down here for items 4, 5, 6, and 7.
I don't have that in front of me. So if
You've got a 1 3-inch overlay versus the HA5 or micro surfacing, which was quite a bit cheaper, but
thank you.
I know that you were studying some of this with Wichita and whatnot, and what conclusions you've come to, I guess, over the quality between the two. Is it worth the extra money, or can we get by with the cheaper options just fine?
And it depends on kind of what you're really looking for. The 3-inch mill and overlay, you're going to get a much smoother street, and it's going to last longer because you're smoothing out. The milling is just like taking sandpaper and rubbing it over. You're taking off that top surface layer of the asphalt. And then the 3-inch overlay, you're putting on new virgin asphalt on top of that. So that's going to last longer. The
How much-
HA5 is just you're basically painting the surface. So it's similar to the slurry seal, but I've heard there's better luck with the HA5.
Okay, I guess that's partly what I'm asking, how much difference there is. How much do you mill off when you mill it?
A lot of times it's like 1/4 to 1/2 inch. And then sometimes you'll do a wedge mill on the edges so you get more of a crown in the street.
Okay, so not a huge amount compared to what
Correct.
you're putting back. And I'm going to go back to up there of 53rd. From Woodlawn east, it's got pretty good cracks going down the length of the road. Are those all going to be repaired before we do another coat on top? Because we're talking about doing a 5-inch overlay.
Those will be crack sealed prior to, but you may still get some reflective cracking. And those, I have really struggled with that street. It's one of those that, you do the best that you can with the information you have at the time. I have since learned that through talking to multiple people with the county and other contractors actually, that hedge trees along the edges of the road, they really suck the water out of the soil, so underneath the street. And so you get almost a freeze thaw action in the summer.
So it's
And
kinda
that's
like
part of what
when
is
you
causing
see
those
clay
cracks.
Turn into big gaps between it.
Right.
Okay.
So while the treatment that we used with the super slurry works very good on virgin streets with no trees around, not quite so good when you have those hedge trees on one side or the other, because then you get that freeze thaw, pseudo freeze thaw where the moisture is going out and coming back and causing the cracks. And so we would have been better off, had I known at the time, to put the Wichita standard crushed rock base. And that may not have solved the issue. You may still have had the cracking going on with the thin lift that we put on it years ago.
So this HA5, is this the same process that Wichita is using today?
They use different processes, and Dave and Tim have been extensively researching kind of what they're using and as well as different processes available. And they have not completed that report yet, but they are working on it. The HA5, we have seen the county does, not county, but county does use that product as well. There's a few townships in the area that use it. And what I have been told is people think it's a brand new street. We saw today that somebody thought that the slurry seal went down and you got a brand new street. The HA5 is similar to what we put on the parking lots this year, but it's a more durable product and is meant for traffic and for street use, for residential street use.
So what is the recommendation that you are making on this sheet here today? I guess it's really from Ted, but I'm sure you had input to it.
Really, these are just a list that we were discussing 3 months ago, spending $3 million on. But I think the number one priority and consensus of the council is reconstruct 53rd, or we don't know. We're just kind of going through the list of projects, but I think everything's waiting on Woodlawn before we can even decide on this stuff. But
with the $3 million bond, we're not going to get past the first three items.
yeah, that's what
Yeah.
we're.
So talking the rest of the surface treatments, maybe that can be part of our maintenance program or some of the typical funds we would allocate to streets. But I don't think it is immediately on our horizon to even consider those unless we think one of those needs to be a higher priority than one of the 1, 2, and 3 above it.
Was this put in here? And I'm just asking because I don't know exactly why this was put on here like this, but we have some extra money in our capital improvement budget this year. Because of a couple things that have been favorable for us. Was this put on here as maybe looking at one of those options to use some of that capital expenditure money? I'm
No,
just trying to understand.
No,
what
this
we're
was
thinking.
just,
What's the process?
if you see the date, it was July 10th. So this is when we presented this to see if you were interested in bonding any projects and what they might be. And Ann put this together, and I think there's probably $5 million worth. And the consensus was, okay, we could probably handle, based on Ted's numbers, about 3 million. And so 1, 2, and 3 were going to be our 3 million.
Okay.
And now, as the mayor's mentioning, what we were going to spend this year, and I sent that out in an email, what we've done so far. And we were guesstimating that we may have to do a study for, I think, 150,000 for 254, and that ended up is really about 11,000. So what you had set aside for that study is available, and so that would be something to discuss as we get the other projects done, how they bid out, and how much extra we have.
Well, that might pay for one of these other projects. And like we were talking earlier, we need to make sure we're doing the maintenance so that our roads aren't falling apart.
Mm-hmm.
So if this is something good to do and it needs to be done, then we need to see, is microsurfacing the right way? Because that's relatively cheap compared to the mill and overlay.
Mm-hmm.
We could do all 4 projects for the microsurfacing for the cost of 1 mill and overlay.
And that's the decision that council is going to have to make as far as, do you want a shorter term project or do you want a longer term project? The microsurfacing HA5, those are probably about a 5-year treatment, whereas the 3-inch overlay, that would be more of a 10 to 12-year treatment.
Okay. So switching gears just a little bit, with saying on capital improvements, are we still looking at a 47th Street reconstruction for this year?
The last time I drove it, it really wasn't. It depends on when you drive it. It is in bad shape. And I certainly can look at that. Unfortunately, I have been snowed with all my other projects. So that has not been quite top priority for me. But we certainly can look at that and get that going.
Well, I just want to make sure that we've put this money aside for these projects. I want to make sure we're getting them done. And I
Right.
understand you have a lot on your plate, and so we've tried to help adjust some of that for you.
Right.
I know Mr. Lasher's done a lot of work on that issue. But if this is something we want to do this year, I think we got to get going on it, don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you told me it's 5 or 10 years, and I'd sure lean to that alternative treatment to gain 5 years on our road on all 4 of those projects, rather than doing the 3-inch mill and overlay.
I mean, I would like to know more about the alternative treatment, the details of it, and comparing the two before. I mean, I guess I could trust you on it, and that's maybe would be fine too. But I personally would also just like to know more about it and some,
Sure.
some more details. And maybe at some point I'm going slightly overboard on how much I should know about road treatment or whatever. But I would like more details.
Certainly. And Ty, and in preparing these, Ty had asked for some kind of options and order of magnitude estimates. So in preparing that, I'm not even sure which one I would recommend because I don't know enough about the different products and treatments there are out there. So I would have to do some additional research. Dave and Tim have started that. And so I'd need to kind of get with them and go further. But this was not meant to be a, let's do this right now. It's just kind of giving you options and price ranges to start the discussion, start considering where you want to move forward.
So I think I'm getting losing the forest and the trees here. Are we talking about just putting these in order? I mean, do we kind of, I mean, I think we know that 53rd Light's this huge problem. And then if we're not sure what's going on with Woodlawn, is there more to, I mean, that's a lot of, I mean, that's millions and millions of dollars in those two sentences right there. Is there more to discuss in these details? I'm kind of hazy on where, what we're deciding on.
So here's where we are. We had a fairly good year on some of the capital improvement projects. I mean, some of them went over, but some went under. But then the big one was the K254. We set aside 150,000 and it only was 11. Okay, so that puts out that just under $135,000 that we have in our budget that we've not allocated to do anything with. So one of the thoughts I had, and I don't think that, from what I hear from Ann tonight, I don't think she's ready to make this recommendation. But one of the thoughts I had was maybe we should pick one of these and do a test with it. But I don't think we're ready to do that. So I'm not going to suggest we go down that road. But I was just trying to understand what are our options with this money, because the other thing that hasn't been spent on that capital improvement is the rebuild of 47th Street. Those are the two things that are there. Okay, so that's where I was going with that. Okay.
Am I missing rebuild the 47th Street on the list?
It's not on
It's not on that list. It's on the capital improvement.
This list was major
the original
roads.
priority list.
Right.
Yeah.
This was the one we did
original
from
list
March.
for the year. Yeah.
And I think you got a copy of this email to you last week.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
And just to remind everyone, the reason why we do a transfer to the capital improvement reserve is because it's a non-budgeted fund. We don't lose any, you don't lose it if you don't use it type of situation where, yes, it's important to let's get it moving and bid on these projects. But a lot of the strategy too is maybe in the later months we get better bids or we can pick the time we bid. So we're not in the situation where it's November, December, and we have to go out to bid because it's in our budget for that year. Now, like Mayor Benaj said, it's important to get started on a lot of these and know where we're at. And I think I'll continue that process of giving you guys, a printout of where we're at on each project. Maybe have a project summary every other month or month.
That's helpful. It's good to know where we are on that capital improvement stuff, so that we can make sure that we're trying to do the best we can with the money that's available. So this was very good, and I appreciate this sheet. So do we have any other direction we need to give the city on streets?
No, just wanted to kind of give you an update, and we'll know more after the KDOT bid, and then we'll revisit all these. And as Ted says, there's no, you passed a resolution to issue a bond at a 2.75 million, I believe it was, something like that. But all those can change. The dollar amount can change. The date can change. We can say, listen, we're not going to be ready to issue that in October like what we had thought. We want to push it out to November or December, and that's no problem.
Okay, very good.
So I guess from my perspective, would you like me to get you numbers on the design for 53rd Street?
I think we need to know what those numbers are. We need to know what we're getting into.
Sure.
Yeah.
I can get you numbers for the design, and then the actual construction costs will come later
Will
on.
they come later? Because they don't know what they're bidding on until they see the design, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've been down that road a few times, so, okay.
And so we'll have to pay for that engineering study out of existing funds, right?
Yes,
Because
the
we won't
engineering
have bonded
design.
yet, so that'll likely come out of the capital improvement funds.
That'll have to be something we'll have to decide from council.
Yeah.
We can't make that decision tonight. But, okay. Okay. I don't know if I had any more questions. I think we're ready to move on to the next item. Or do we need a break? Because we've been at it for
We need a break, Mr. Mayor.
2.5 hours. Okay.
Another hour's worth of work.
Let's take a 10-minute break, and if we need to truncate this agenda, let's think about what we need to cut off, okay? I don't want to go past 10.
We don't even need to talk about November election questions, do we? It's too
Yeah.
late to do anything about it.
We need to understand it. Yes, we do. That's one we can't cut off. Okay, so I'm going to jump down to the November election item because that is an item that we do need to talk about. And the other two items are a little more discretionary. We might get to them, may not. I think most have heard that there was a Jackie, our city attorney, Jackie Kelly, had worked with the election office and created these three ballot questions, working with them, close contact with them, and they approved them, and everything was going fine. And then they went to publish them and said, wait a second, there's a problem here. But it was a problem that they kind of let us down into. And the problem is that the way I understand this, and we have talked with the Secretary of State's office about this, as well as the local election office, binding actions, there are statutes on what can be a binding action on an election. And these issues don't qualify for binding actions. These have to be discretionary or non-binding actions, I guess is a better term for it. And the opinion of the Attorney General from 1974, and if you remember, the Attorney General back then was Vern Miller, issued an opinion that non-binding actions could not be commingled with a binding action election, which the end result of that is those three items that we approved to go on the ballot cannot go on the ballot under that Attorney General's opinion. But Attorney General opinions are not law, but they are guidance unless there is law that overrides them. Now, there's two ways the law can override it. It can be done through judicial action, a court can override it, or a legislature can override it. But those are the two ways it can be done. But you, an attorney doing research on that, unless they were engrossed in election, actual operation of the election, would probably never run across that Attorney General's opinion because it's not a published opinion. It's an opinion that's kept in the record of the Attorney General's office. So not like a legal opinion from a court that is published and goes in the law books. Okay. So that's where we are today. So Ms. Kelly has given me 5 options that we have. And I'm not saying we have to make a decision about it tonight, but it's something to think about. So one is we could send out a mail-out ballot. And I think that some of you have actually given some feedback to Ms. Kelly about that. We could pass a charter ordinance, which would trigger a protest petition if enough voters petitioned in 60 days to force it to be added to the county election, special election as a binding question. That would make it a binding question if it was a protest petition. Okay. Bel Aire can conduct an election with just this item on the ballot on a different day. The county may be willing to help provide machines and administration, but our city would have to pay the cost of the election. We could consider legal action against the county in district court for changing course, initially telling us this would be okay and then changing that. We would have to do that right away because there's a publication date coming Friday, so you'd have to get an immediate injunction against the election office. Personally, I don't think that's a viable thing for just, and I'm no attorney, okay? What I know about law is that you rarely get a temporary injunction unless you're likely to win the case. And this one is in muddy enough waters that I'm not sure that we would win the case, but it is in muddy waters, okay? The 5th item is work with Secretary of State and possibly the Attorney General's office to review the question and possibly propose legislation addressing advisory questions going on ballots in a more favorable way for cities. And one of the things that between my discussion with Ms. Kelly, we came up with is that when that decision was made by the Attorney General back in 1974, technology has changed drastically since then. When a voter goes into a voting booth, they don't think about, is this binding action or non-binding action? I've never thought about that. And I don't know anybody that does. But from a legal perspective, that the commingling is an issue in their mind. I do think there might be solutions to that, but they'd be legislative solutions that we could get our legislature to fix. But that's where we are today. I think the real question we need to think about tonight is what direction do we want to give staff as to what do we do anything at next city council meeting or call a special meeting if we want to move forward with legal challenge, because we'd have to get something filed within the next couple of days if we're going to do a legal challenge. So it's really up for discussion for you to tell us, so we can tell the staff what we want to do in this respect.
Mr. Mayor, could you color in the charter, the option number 2, the charter ordinance? What does that entail?
Okay, so the council has the authority to make those charter ordinance, to make all these changes that we propose before the citizens as the council. That's an authority the council has, and it's a charter ordinance. Once you pass a charter ordinance, and I hope I have all this right, because again, I'm not the attorney here. Okay, and unfortunately, she can't be here tonight. But if you pass a charter ordinance, it is subject to a protest petition. The citizens can go and put a petition together to force that issue to go to the ballot. Now, that is an issue that can be on a binding election ballot, but it can't happen in November. It would have to be the next election would be August. Okay, so it wouldn't be decided until then.
Do you know how many signatures that would take? I think I remember it's a lot.
I don't have the numbers on the.
It's not that bad because it's a certain percent of the last voters in the last election, which, that's typically pretty low.
Okay, so we had about 1,500 in the last city election. So
yeah.
Okay.
So you could, as the mayor said, you could approve a charter ordinance at the next council meeting, or the first one in October. There's a 60-day protest period where if the voters presented a protest to you calling for an election, then at that point you could just simply rescind it and then it goes away. Or you would have to wait till the next one because there's not enough time for a 60-day protest and then what the county would need to put on the November election.
So we could almost, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so from my perspective, the term limits, I don't think that's a controversial issue. I'd be fine with moving forward with charter ordinances there. I think we were kind of split really even on whether it made sense to do the charter ordinance for changing the mayor's term or whether it made sense to put it on the ballot. I was really in favor of the ballot because I think it is somewhat of a controversial issue. I have gotten feedback from citizens on it, and I really wanted to know, kind of what is the will of the voters on this mayor's term. And so I was a lot less comfortable just deciding that because that's a really big deal. It's been this way for a long time in our city, and there's a lot of reasons to do it one way versus the other. And so I really wanted some public input on that, and I thought putting it on the ballot was a great way to do that. So I'm really disappointed that that's not on the ballot. I don't think taking legal action is probably the right thing to do there. That sounds like a lot of trouble for maybe not what we're after here. We maybe should send a letter as the council to our state legislators and make them aware of this issue and suggest some changes because I think this is an appropriate thing to put on a ballot personally for the voters to weigh in on. I don't know. Is it possible that we could hold a public hearing on this and proactively seek some additional public feedback, public input on the term of the mayor without going to the expense of paying for and holding our own special election? Is that something that we've considered?
Sure, you could hold a town hall meeting and discuss that or anything like that. Certainly you could.
Certainly something to think about.
I think that's a good idea. So I definitely favor the charter ordinance option for all three. And, if enough people do the protest petition and ends up on the ballot anyway. So, that seems like a good route. I'm not in favor of the mail-in ballot. I'm not in favor of a sort of special election. I agree sending a letter to the legislature, informing them of this issue and getting, some clarification there is definitely a good idea and might be finding kind of fun to have a lawsuit, but I don't want to do that, I guess. So yeah, I'm in favor of doing the charter ordinance.
Yeah, thinking through this, and it's like seems like the charter makes sense. I honestly, I'd even be like willing to sign the petition to protest my own. But I'm fine with putting it on a ballot, right? So it's a weird thing. I'm just trying to figure out, is it confusing? You know what I mean? That's almost like the biggest headache. Like, we were doing it because we have to do it this way because they wouldn't let us put it on the ballot. We'd be happy to put it on the ballot. But by having to do it this way, it is more confusing, right? I mean, that's a kind of a frustration.
Yeah, to me, it's just amazing to me that we cannot allow our citizens to have that kind of input on just a regular ballot, and it has to be a special ballot to do that with. I'm just surprised.
So I got a question, Mr. Mayor. What makes it non-binding? That doesn't make sense.
Okay, so apparently the statutes list what can be a binding action on a ballot, and anything that's not on that list has to be a non-binding action.
Oh,
okay. So this one isn't on the list.
So they
These
have a
issues are not on the
specific
list.
enumerated list, and if it's not on the list,
that's what I understand. Now, if I don't have that exactly right, remember, I'm not an attorney.
That doesn't make a lot of sense, so it must be the right reason.
Well, and I think what makes this worse is that we've already advertised that this is going to be something that's on the ballot. It's been published in the breeze that these are going to be questions on the ballot. And so the public's expecting to be able to vote on these things. And we're really finding out late here that the election office or the attorney general's office isn't going to let the public have that input. And so that I think that's going to create some real confusion around this topic.
Yes, I think I like the idea of doing a town hall and sending out some mailers saying, hey, we're going to have this, advertise as much as we can and say this. We thought this was going to be on the ballot. It's not. So, just get feedback. Should we vote on it ourselves or? Yeah, you just kind of, I don't know.
Well,
yeah, open that discussion.
Vote here.
Well, I know, but I mean, just in the town hall, kind of propose.
Oh, yeah.
Would
Okay,
you be in favor of us just doing the ordinance and not having it on the ballot at all?
Yeah.
I don't know. Come up with the options. What the options would be.
I'd like to get clarification from Jackie on one point. I understood that if somebody did a referendum or whatever the right word is, petition, once it was validated, we had a certain amount of time we had to have the election. So if they were validated in February, we might have to have an election in April or May, and that would be at the city's cost. So I don't want to get into that situation.
Yeah, we could get that clarification then. Okay.
And my preference from the list of options that went out would be to do a mail-in ballot of all the voters, all the registered voters. Because I think that is the cheapest solution of everything other than us just doing it, ramrodding it through.
Then you have to have somebody who tabulates that vote.
Yes.
Yeah, we'd probably try to hire the county to do it. And I think at one point we'd looked and a mail-in's like $6,000 or something because you got to pay postage and return postage and all that.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, that gets kind of expensive, but a lawsuit will easily cost more than that. And I'm kind of in favor of the lawsuit too, just because I don't like everything that happened, but I'm not going to suggest we do it.
Right. Yeah.
I just think the whole thing's stupid. And I
that.
can't believe it got to where it went and that we didn't have enough notification to fix it.
We learned on the 8th of September.
Yes, 2 days before the deadline or something.
The deadline was September 1st. We got it in before the deadline, and we learned on the 8th of September that.
We didn't even learn until a week after it was due.
Right. So. All right.
So do you want staff you want us to schedule a town hall meeting? Is that what
I think that's what the consensus sounds like to schedule this town hall meeting, have a discussion about this issue, about these issues, and then we'll decide what we do from there.
I mean, if no one shows up, if no one cares. If thousands of people show up, everybody cares. I mean, who knows?
We may have to have a meeting outside.
Yeah, I don't know.
To draft a letter for the legislature from the council. Okay. So that we could at least express our issues with the with legislature, because I'd like to see them do something. I mean, now's the time to draft legislation. You don't wait till January to do that. That's too late. It needs to be drafted and filed right away, okay? And it could be done, I think. This is the time to do it, if we're going to do something like that. Okay? So I appreciate your input on this, and I think we'll go on to the next item, which is use of City Hall.
So the reason we put this together is City Hall was actually built with the community room, and the idea was for the community to use it. The city uses it for town hall meetings, things like that, but we do have people that rent it, and in the fee schedule that you all approve every year, there's a fee in there for that. But we get questions about how do we handle it, and we've just kind of over the last few years, or even before that, we've kind of came up with, this is the way we'll handle this, is the way we'll handle it. We get questions, and so we thought it would be really best for staff to have a policy that you all had input in and then approved, so that we gave everybody the same information. They understood before they rented it what was required, who could rent it, for what purposes, things like that. So that's what was in your packet. What was in red is some of Jackie's comments. But anyway, that's why it was on the agenda, to get your input and your thoughts on this.
Are these like problems that we've had that you're just like, this has happened and we're trying to fix, or is this kind of how it's
No, it's really more for questions, because like we've had questions about, can we use it for a political purpose? Can a church meet here? Things like that. And so that's why, TED staff often gets a lot of questions about, can we use it weeknights, like if there's a council meeting, all those types of things. So really what we did is, and TED staff was pretty helpful in, okay, here's all the questions we get. Here's kind of how we've handled it. This is what we would recommend that the policy be. So really that's what it is. We're just addressing all the questions that we typically get and what our recommendation is of how we handle those.
Yeah, I see one thing here that I see one thing missing, or I missed seeing it, one of the two.
Okay.
I know one thing that used to happen was a monthly jam session.
Okay.
And from the rules I'm reading, that would not be allowed, because that would be the same group every month.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So why would we not let that happen?
So the reason is because we've had churches want to meet every Sunday. And then it gets tied up. Again, if we're only allowing it on Saturdays, then if you had somebody wanting it every month on the first Saturday, then that limits the people that could use it for that first Saturday.
Well, maybe we should put a limit to when they can ask for it. I mean, you can't ask for every first Saturday of the calendar year on January 1st. Maybe you have to come in on a regular basis and keep asking for it or something. Or in this case, I think it was under the seniors. So is that something that comes under a senior activity and it's exempt?
So yeah, it depends on what the jam session, if that was something that the seniors were doing, then that's typically something that's a city function, is senior events. So that if that's what it was under the auspice of, then it would be okay, because it's a city function.
Okay. I just don't want to throw out a group like that really are using the facility and not harming it in any way.
Yeah, I think I recognize that problem as well. Like, to me, it's like, well, if no one else wants Sunday from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m., like, who cares? Let them have it every week. But then you go, well, what if someone wants, Saturday, every Saturday for eternity, and then you're like, well, we can't have only one group in the entire city ever get to use this room. And so, yeah, that does seem like a kind of a delicate problem because like a church is really going to need it every Sunday. And so it seems like we should craft it. I think there's a way to craft this policy that doesn't limit it to twice, but also doesn't allow someone to have it every Sunday or Saturday night or whatever they want it forever, because I do think that not that I really want to kick out churches necessarily, but I can understand if you have a policy where someone could tie it up at a certain time, that could be problematic.
Well, I can see not allowing churches in or political groups because we don't want to imply that we're endorsing anything.
Now, one thing that has occurred in the community room is candidate forums, right? For city council, for school board. I think those are really productive for our community so long as they're designed with all the candidates invited as the policy lays out, and it is something that concerns the residents of Bel Aire. And so I personally am in favor of allowing those to continue. I saw that the way that it's specifically worded, it would only, I think, be for City of Bel Aire City Council elections. I'd probably favor making that be a little bit more broad so that it was any election that concerned the citizens of Bel Aire. And go ahead and open that up. That's just my opinion.
Because if they pay the rent and they're Bel Aire residents, and we're not running around to every group to make sure we agree with everything they say during the time that they've rented it, right?
I think typically these you've charged rent for these kind of events, have you?
No, and on page 2 it does say that neither room may be used for political purposes except for government elections. So that would be school board or City of Bel Aire candidate forums. So that would be if someone wanted to have a forum for state representative for our district or whomever.
Is that
could
the way
use
you-
it.
I think I would like to see that worded a little differently because of the way that reads right now. It sounds like it has to be
Okay.
a City of Bel Aire
Government.
election, and that means only council members and mayor.
Okay, so we could.
And I'd like to see that
Yeah.
worded a little better there.
That's what I read too. And I'd probably also like to strike this sponsored by a Bel Aire nonprofit, because you could have an individual that's coordinating that's not necessarily affiliated with any organization. And so long as all the candidates are invited and the other criteria is met, I'm not sure that it needs to be necessarily sponsored by a nonprofit. Maybe not sponsored by a for-profit, if that makes sense. But
so
I
that you
like
can
what
have
you just said though about making sure that all the candidates for whatever the position is were invited.
and it has to be of interest to the citizens of Bel Aire.
Right.
It can't be.
It can't be
you
the
can't go
Derby
down-
election.
The
or,
Derby
you know.
election, yeah.
Okay.
So you can't just invite one candidate to show up and have a forum.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So the other issue that I saw is in General Guidelines H, which the one just above there. So it says half price for employees. Now, what if one of us wants to do that? Are we considered employees or one of the?
That would be
council-
your discretion. That would be, yeah, that would be up to, if you wanted to include that in elected officials, that would certainly do that for, yeah.
And I don't know what the feeling of people would be on that, but I just saw that. I thought, well, of course, Ted and I had this little discussion about.
I was going to say, Mary, you're an employee.
I'm actually a 1099 person.
Yeah, that's right.
Contractor.
Yeah, I'm not a W-2 person.
Yeah.
So, okay.
How often is the community room rented?
Oh, I don't know. Do you know, Ted? Not often.
I'm just wondering. should it be
Two
rented
weekends a
at all?
month. 2 weekends a month, probably. Summertime, it might be 3. It's pretty 2 times a month. Yeah. I mean, that's counting all the blood drives and whatnot, but it's.
I don't know why it should just sit there empty.
So if someone rents it, uses it, we have to pay a staff member to be here for that? No, we'll just give them the key.
Who makes sure the door is locked? The police department does that, or?
Well, I mean, we do have a police department run checks
Yeah.
here, but people are relatively responsible. We found the good thing about this, and Ty didn't really. We struggle sometimes without a policy. You get all kinds of different people that want to rent. They think we're in charge of laying out the layout and everything, you know, we clearly say, no, we're just handing you the key and you can do everything else. Or there's other people that understand that it's just a room to rent. So with general guidelines, we can steer them in that direction and kind of go back to our day to day as well. So that helps.
And there's a whole deposit and refund to the deposit process that we go through every time somebody rents a room, which is a thing.
Yeah, that doesn't have, that's
not
not that big of a deal.
Okay.
Usually we're talking grandma's birthday party and stuff like that. So it's not that difficult.
Was there any other, so that we can make those clarifications, was there any other, anybody else have anything else?
Just to, on the twice in one calendar year, am I solving a problem that doesn't exist? I mean, I just find it weird that that someone couldn't use it more times than that if they wanted to. It's just no one ever does that, so this is just the easiest way to solve the problem, or am I really right that, I mean, I understand that not every single week dominating the time forever, but heck, if they want to rent it, I mean, you know, and it's available and they're not taking it from everybody else, seems like it'd be okay. Or does it just never happen that anybody wants to ever rent it more than once or twice in a year?
It's really, it's just an issue that we get asked once in a while of, can we rent it every month? Or can we rent it every Sunday for church or something like that? And so we're trying to figure out, how do we limit that so that those people can say, I want it every month. And then the mayor comes in and says, well, I'd like to use it for grandma's birthday. And we say, well, sorry, it's for every month for the whole year on that day. And so we're trying to think of, okay, how do we limit that? And maybe it's more about, you know, you can only reserve it within a certain amount of time, within, you know, a month of the day or something. Struggle you run into then is grandma's birthday. They're trying to invite everybody 6 months ahead to get this set up.
Well, I was thinking a priority thing, like you can only rent twice in a year, and then you no longer are guaranteed the room any further than, you know, you can't reserve it more than a week out. Well, no church is going to do that if they're going to have to wait only a week to know if they're going to get it the next week. Or I mean, maybe you'll think of a better way, but I agree with that. Trying to solve that problem might be a little tricky.
I kind of hear what you're saying, and what I was thinking was, after you rent it twice, you get last dibs. If somebody else comes along and says they want it, tough luck, you can't have it this month.
Yeah, I guess I'm just curious.
Some time frame on that.
Like, how often do churches do that? I've never heard of churches renting a city hall. That seems, I don't know. Is that a thing that happens?
They rent schools a lot.
They do.
I've seen, yeah, but schools kind of make sense, but I don't know. I just, the city hall seems, I've just never heard of that before.
They're just looking for a place.
Yeah,
I've seen
understand that.
everything.
I mean, churches start up and you know, a few people, and I get that, but I don't know. It seems kind of weird.
A real estate guy I know rents strip malls for churches.
Because exactly like what we're talking about, you can't necessarily guarantee that you're going to be able to have it. It just seems like I agree, some kind of limitation.
You lose your reservation power after a certain amount of visits, right?
That seems to make sense.
What if we put something about that after, if you want to rent it more than 2 times, it has to be approved by the city manager or something? And then that way I could look at it and say, okay, well, what do we got? Anybody wanting it? Looks like nobody wants it. We'll tentatively give it to you unless something changes 2 weeks ahead, or, you know, come up with just a case by case basis.
I mean, I'm fine with that. I mean, I'd probably recommend not promising it to a church or somebody that thinks they're going to use it every day for years or whatever, you know, because you don't want to put them, you know, churches get themselves in rentals and then the rentals go out from underneath them and they're super mad about it. And it's like that organization probably never should have had them there in the first place, because, you know, the rug gets pulled out from under them, and we don't want to do that to somebody. We need to be upfront that we're probably not going to be able to promise you this, you know, a certain time for all time.
So these policies, they only apply to the after business hours rentals. How does it work for organizations like the Chamber of Commerce that might use that room during City Hall operating hours?
So yeah, we let anybody that's really related to the city, we'll let them use it during the day, and typically we don't have any problems because usually one of our staff's there, like the chief or me or whoever, and it's usually a lunch thing. Sometimes they'll do some training, like in an afternoon or something, and they'll just close the door. So we never have issues with that. The concern we would have if it's grandma's birthday party and we've got little kids running in and out and playing in the hallways, which they'll do. When they're renting the room, they can get to the hallway and in the bathrooms and things like that. So then it kind of becomes a disruption.
Well, yeah, my concern was I wanted to make sure that nothing in this policy prohibits that type of, use during business hours, right? We still want like the Chamber of Commerce to be able to meet and have lunch meetings in the community room and host those types of events. And I guess just looking at this at first glance, it wasn't immediately clear to me that type of regular, maybe even monthly use would be allowed under this policy.
Yeah, I'll have to look through it. I know that was the intention that city uses could be done during the day, and maybe we just in this.
Maybe even just something that during business hour usage is at the discretion of the city manager.
Right. So yeah, I'll look through that and make sure because the intent is for that to happen.
I assumed it was, but.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure we weren't accidentally creating a problem here.
Yeah. Okay.
I guess a question I had is that it seems the senior room is not open to residents alone.
Yeah. It's got carpet in there and things like that. And so, there's TV, those types of things. And during the day, it's really used for seniors can go in and read or get on the internet, things like that. So we don't really do anything during the day other than like a city purpose that we had to use it. But for the rental time, we don't rent that out other than we will allow HOAs to use it just for a meeting, something like that for meeting purpose, but not for like a birthday party or something where cake or something would be spilt on the floor.
I know the mayor's hosted like coffee with the mayor in that room before, and that's been a really effective public engagement and meeting there. How does that fall under this type of policy?
Yeah. And I think, City of Bel Aire events or uses take precedence and will have first access to any of the rooms. So if the mayor wanted to have an event in the whatever room for city function, then that would take precedence and we'd let whoever was going to rent it know that we need it for that town hall or whatever it may be, because that was a concern that we've had because it's happened in the past. Someone has rented it on a day that we needed to do a town hall or something like that. And so we'd have to work around us. So this allows us to say, it really doesn't work for us to move it to a different day. So city's going to take precedence over. And so that'd be the same with the city, the senior room.
So this would not prohibit use of it for that purpose of coffee at the mayor or something like that.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I just didn't see anything like in the senior room section that made me think that was necessarily an allowable usage.
Yes, I think that we talk about that in general guidelines for City Hall.
Okay.
Under E, it says City of Bel Aire events or uses take precedence will have first access to the rooms.
Okay.
And
Plural.
cancel
All of
reservation
them.
if there's a conflict with 2 weeks notice.
Sounds good.
Okay.
I did notice in one section we changed citizen to resident under community room, but we hadn't done that in general guidelines for City Hall under bullet point A.
Okay.
Just a semantic thing.
Yeah, but it needs to be consistent.
Yeah.
Which one did you point out again?
Item A under general guidelines.
The citizens versus residents.
Yeah. There may be others. That one just stood out to me.
Okay.
Okay, so any other comments on this guideline, use of city hall facilities?
I don't know that we addressed the comment on P for senior room. Do you want to restrict this to Bel Aire orgs or intend to leave it open to any org? Looked like that was a question that maybe somebody was looking to answer.
So under senior room, it says that it may be utilized by a nonprofit, government organization, or agency such as HOA, senior presentation, but not being used by the senior center. So I guess what that was Jackie's question is that okay with you? Or do you want to allow any organization to use it?
How often do the seniors use it when it's not for a program?
So they use during the day. It's used pretty regularly. They'll play cards in there. People go in and get on the computer and things. So there's typically, maybe one or two people in there if it's an event. But there's other times when there's no one in there.
I thought the cards and games were scheduled events.
Yeah, they are scheduled events. Oh, you're talking about just walk-ins?
Right.
Not very often.
Okay, so you could probably plan around all their events relatively easily.
Yep.
I don't see a reason not to let somebody use it. I probably would prohibit any kind of food just because of the carpeting.
Any other comments for this item? I think looking at the late hour, probably would request that we put the employee recognition and bonus policy on later. That looks like that's going to take some time to talk through.
Okay.
I don't think it will be. Okay. So unless there's other issues that we need to discuss tonight, all right, I'll call the meeting adjourned. So everybody have a good evening, and we will see you next Tuesday.